Hey, welcome everybody. Make sure I'm up here online. Very short notice on this one. Sometimes you just have something tells you like when it's the right time to do something, and this was the right time to cover this material. And I want to get some this put out there a little bit. So bear with me, those watching in the future. Give it a few minutes and then make sure I'm talking about something relevant, because I'm going to get into the topic pretty fast without stalling too much. But the theme for tonight is Hollywood MK cults, and I'm not going to talk about this in any sort of salacious or um, exploitive way. It's not going to be like that. When I was putting together this material, it was pretty. I was just learning a lot of things. I was coming to a lot of realizations about what had happened um, when I was younger and what I was really surrounded by. Hang on really quick. So what I need to do is review some of my material about that. So hang on. All right. So I got that going. Okay, looks like we got some people online here. Well, hello. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Susan. Appreciate that. Everyone else who's joined, I appreciate you too. Yeah, I don't care how many people are on here tonight. Obviously, I would like, there to be whatever, but I just tried to get it going. And so yeah, without further ado, what I would like to do is just begin with I might play this clip twice during this presentation. That way, maybe like it starts off and those who watch it, and that way you don't have to watch it at the end. But I'm going to do a quick. What I'm going to be covering here, folks, is just so you. Okay, let me get this going. When I first started really researching everything around 2016, I've always felt like there was something off about my childhood. Like I knew it, right? Like I was in a strange neighborhood where a lot of weird things happened. I've talked about that neighborhood in Bothell, Washington, at length, and I'm realizing that a lot of like what my internal struggle is related to this exact thing, and it's the material I avoid discussing after I did it. Like I almost never come back to this material, and I don't know why. I don't know why that I don't reference this more frequently, but you guys need to know why I came to the conclusions that I did relative to paperclip Nazism, their bloodlines, and that there's been generations of children now since 1945 that have been raised in these sort of Nazi um, cult systems, and they themselves a lot of times are completely unaware of what it is, and they get brought up thinking that this is like their experience is authentic and normal, even though it's been very planned for them. They've been surrounded by people that were in similar types of programs, and by the time you get to be an adult, you have this sort of like, man, uh, hmm, I guess that happened, like, what is that? Because so many things were made normal to me. Um, and I don't get it. I don't understand why there was such a, well, I do. I don't get why more people don't see it. They don't understand, and can't see it with more compassion, myself included. I forget. I forget so easily when I'm angry just what happened. It's almost like when I'm in the midst of my anger towards some of these people that have done this, I complete, and again, it's justified anger. I have a right to be upset, and it's for me, I'm just more outraged by what I witnessed. What I experienced was bad, but not, nothing that I would run around trying to like get people's attention about. It's more what I witnessed and what I know happened. And so those unfamiliar, why I know so much about this is because I was basically born in Bothell, Washington area, which is a suburb of Seattle. And I lived about a third of a mile from one of these underground facilities. It's a Nike missile silo that's labeled S-03-LS. Those who are a little bit more savvy, I'll just put this on the screen. This is no joke. By the way, guys, I don't play that. Uh, those who are worried about April Fools and things of that nature, this being April 1st, you'll never find me buying into it or playing into it. Well, I mean, I can get fooled, mind you, but I don't go around fooling. So that won't be something that I ever do. Okay. So I just want to make sure that's clear since we're going to be leading into that holiday. And I don't want people thinking that this is all part of any of that kind of crap. I shouldn't have to say it, guys, because this is too serious. And one would hope that you would figure out that I don't play that game. But it's just letting you guys know that there's zero parts here that are meant to be ironic or foolish or anything else like that. But I figured, like, right now, what's going on in our country and abroad is just so nearly inexplainable, how ridiculous it's been and getting. And I do think that everything will prevail. Good will prevail. God will prevail. The natural order of things will prevail. There's some things in the world that you just can't stop. And that is the human experience. It's unstoppable. We will always maintain. Okay, that's the human spirit. That's the human condition. That's the human soul. We're producing everything around us. We are actually this entire earth. And these lame attempts at getting us all to fold in and control a bunch of us from birth and maintain that control over a lifetime, that whole system of slavery is ending. And I'm just processing now, like some of these other people that, like, I'm trying to figure out like how I should perceive them. I don't expect other people to have, look, I get really angry when I think about it, like the things that they get away with and the things they got away with. But I'm also really aware, based on being raised in these neighborhoods, just what some of these kids went through and why they're so deranged today, why they have these beliefs. And this has been my internal struggle about what I can forgive and what I can forget. I can forget almost nothing. I don't know what it is. I seem to have this memory of an elephant that is almost like a curse, that even when I want to forget things, they will resurface. I will be haunted by memories. I don't want to be, obviously. About 10 years ago, I started getting haunted by these memories of James Pettigrew, my grandfather. He's a very evil man, and he hurt a lot of people. You're people that to this day, from time to time, I look at them in the eye. He's a horrendous child abuser. I'm just trying to avoid saying what he is directly and what exactly he did because I don't want to hurt you. I don't want you having those thoughts in your head, but it's bad. He was a very, very bad man, and they let him go. What you've been seeing the last couple of days, those of you who had access to the ones that I'm not going to put back online, the streams that I did, it's that anger rising to the surface. And tonight, I wasn't even going to stream, but I went into this very deep, deep sleep after having dinner. And when I woke up, it just all of this said, like, I know what to do. And I know what I need to talk about now. And I know why nothing felt right the last few days. It's because I went straight into the, you know, and like I completely forgot. Like, it's like almost like all the things that I knew about the history leading into all this, I forgot. And I only had vengeance in my heart at that time. And it was the loop of it could be toxic, you guys. And I don't want you to have that. I don't want you, watching this material and absorbing that. Okay. And so I there's enough people here where I want to start this off with something that's a little bit yeah. I'm going to probably play this clip a couple times tonight. I'm going to start off with it, and then towards the end, I'm going to play it again. Hey, thank you there, White Boy and Susan. I appreciate you joining. Thank you for the comments. I'm in a flow, so if I'm not saying things, I'm sorry. That's why. But thank you for joining. I appreciate your participation and being here, and you have great comments. Thank you. So hang on here. Let me get this going. So I got to find. I'm doing this very on the fly. Kermit, what's that about? Kermit, where did you get like? You're gonna have to tell me that one because I can tell you something like. Did you want me to do a Kermit impression? I can do that for a little bit of levity. Or is it the Reign of the Frogs? Is that the joke? Okay. Have I even talked about that with you guys? This is weird. What's going on? This is Kermit the Frog. Okay. Hi ho. Someday I'll find that rainbow connection. The lovers, the dreamers, and me. Okay. I'm trying to keep my voice down a little bit because I don't want to talk too loud here, guys. I'm trying to be courteous in the house here. But like I can't help it, guys. I woke up and I had to do this. So I have video I'm gonna play for you. We got to have, you guys, we have to have the love, we have to have the humor, we can't take that away from it, right? So this is very serious, but yeah, I'm not adverse to having some, we can't have it be all depressing and everything like that, but it's not a very pleasant set of topics. I mean, what can I say? But it needs to be said. It's a challenge, like some of the closest people in my life are in various states of either, they were controlled by this group or, and had they made some of them feel like they were the leaders and that they were in charge of things. And others, they just used and abused their whole lives and they never really got a chance to be their full selves. And when you see, like, I've seen all these sides of it, guys. I've seen some of the people that were raised in these programs go on to be like really powerful, influential people. And then others are always kept on the sidelines and marginalized. And a lot of the ones that are sidelined and marginalized are brilliant, are incredibly talented, are incredibly intelligent, and they're ritualistically, systemically, consistently abused their entire lives. And I need you to see, like, this is their perversion of trinities. And then on top of it, like, I've seen how they'll use one child and weaponize it against the other, and they make one elite and they make one kind of more marginalized in a state of servitude constantly, and they pit them against each other. But the puppet masters are these paperclip Nazis, okay? And they bring them into cults that seem very liberal, that seem like they're freewheeling, and the ones that aren't liberal and freewheeling and like, hey, we're hippies all having an experience. The flip side to that is the corruption and the perversion of Christianity, and using Christianity as their gateway to get the children into the cults where they're equally systemically, ritualistically, and consistently abused from a very young age. And it's normalized to them. And I don't think people understand that we've got like a couple of generations of this in this country since 1945, that now they're about my age. Because, guys, my parents were born right around the time paperclip started in the US, 1945. My mother was raised in an Operation Paperclip. Well, look, it's not officially Operation Paperclip. In fact, the books really don't even talk about it, but there is historical records to back everything up that I'm saying. That's what tonight's about. I'm going to show you where that came from, how I know. Okay, that's what tonight's about. That I'm not just one of those people that says these things like, bad, bad, bad. No, this is like, I resisted talking about this for the longest time, you guys, because I don't even know what to make of some of the people that are causing harm right now. There's that Jesus part of me that wants to like just hold them and hug them and say like, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I wish that when I was a kid, I had the power of an adult, because even then I knew what was wrong that they were doing to you. And I saw some of this, you guys. I mean, I saw it. I can't unsee it. And it's so that part of my soul just cries because I don't know what to do. I feel vengeful towards some of these people that are causing harm sometimes, but I also know what they had happened to them. They never had a fucking shot. They never had any hope. And I don't know where in forgiveness and accountability that these people fall in. I just don't. So I have the material, guys. I mean, unless you really have dug through my channel, you may not have seen this, but I've been talking about this part for years, okay? So this won't be anything new. It just occurred to me that I need to talk about this now because I did have so much venom in me the last couple days. And I got to approach this piece with more compassion and more understanding. So thank you guys, because, you've been patient with me, and hopefully you understand why I'm taking this, whatever. So I'm going to show you some of my playlists because I think that it'd be good for some of you folks that, want to become more familiar with this, to see this material. So I have a couple playlists, okay? This is the cult right here that I've learned that I was, born. So it's a love family cult. Sorry, that's too big. I don't want my head that big. So this playlist right here is the love family cult. And this is why I need to talk about what's going on, because I just know things, guys, that I can't like, and I have question marks about who's who and what's what. And there's so much deception right now, and like people don't really know what these things are. they put out documentaries that just make it seem like they were hippies or they had an experience and that, hey man, we just had these rainbow festivals and these garlic festivals, and yeah, yeah, we believed all this crazy apocalyptic things, but it's that kind of goofy, like dismissive thing or whatever. So the adults that were traffickers and were engaged in fake adoptions that were really just kidnappings turned legit, they raised a bunch of these children in communes and special neighborhoods where abuse was allowed to happen to them. Just children that are just systemically and ritualistically and consistently abused over and over and over again. This is the one right here, I would say, that it was the big revealer to me. So this thing here, it says the Love Family Cult is Steve Allen and son Brian Allen. Okay. This is when I had my weird aha moment. And I don't know who's legit and who's not, guys, but I'm going to share with you a post here that I did. And guys, I've been trying to find a way to approach this for a long time because, it's really easy to, how do I say it? All right, hang on. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the main characters that are in the whole human trafficking disclosure realm. I just want you to know, and I'm not saying this to disparage any of these people. What I'm wondering is those of you who followed me for a long time, why is it that after 6 years being on the Basis Project with Miles Johnston's show for, I don't know, about 7 to 8 hours worth of interviews, some of which covers this exact topic, that's a venue that maybe not everybody knows about, but you've had some pretty high profile people get on there. I mean, he's had Sean Stone, Oliver Stone's son, get mixed in with that group, and he's pretty heavy within these realms of discussing these topics too. And amongst all of these media players and media, figureheads that are very insignificant and important, I see them just interviewing people that really spin us off into nonsense, and they never talk to me. They never talk to me. Even when I have things that connect to things that they connect to, where if we just sat down, we might actually be able to solve something together. And I'm just marginalized and ignored. Now, it's not about my ego, you guys. I'm just wondering that when I have so much corroborative information that could really lead to a significant dent in this, why the media cycle always just goes like, I didn't see that. I didn't hear that. I don't know who that is. Yet they all seem to know who I am. Behind the scenes, I promise you guys, all these people know who I am. So the question becomes, why do they ignore my evidence? Why do they refuse to look into it and not examine why it connects so close to theirs? And my answer to you is in many cases that some of them are involved. And the best way to cover up said thing is to pretend that you care and put yourself out front, and you steal the energy, the light from all the people that are actually trying to solve the problem and funnel it to you where it goes nowhere. This is called gatekeeping. So there are gatekeepers within the narrative involving fighting human trafficking. I've observed, and again, I don't criticize her per se, but I've always kind of wondered why Rose McGowan just seems so off resonance, why she seems to chase the media so intently. And a lot of times I will observe that she seems to be trying to overshadow the actual victim and make herself the focus of everything. And and so again, guys, I that could happen for a lot of reasons. Victims do that too. People that are real victims and have gone through things. And what makes this even more weird is perpetrators oftentimes are real victims. People that help engage and participate oftentimes did get abused. They just accepted the abuse a lot more readily, integrated it into their personality, and they conceal that aspect of who they are while they kind of run things. I am not making that suggestion about these two. I want to be very clear. But I pose this question to you, and I want you to look at this knowing what you know about occultism, rituals, mass resonance manipulation, color coding, especially. I said, question: why do the two biggest media characters fighting human trafficking employ red blue opposite color coding and both have shaved heads? Rose McGowan, Eliza Blue. Rose Blue. Red Blue. Rose Blue. Are we getting the whole story? Would either of them like to interview or talk to me? And again, guys, I'm not chasing the limelight. I'm asking, if what you're doing is legit and you really want the full story, how about you at least verify and validate that I'm telling the truth in your own system? And I'll accept whatever, and this isn't a challenge, guys. I'm just asking, like, why out of compassion? Like, I know a lot of these people are familiar with who I am. They must be by now if they're actually fighting the problem. But it always gets stalled someplace. So, all right. Well, guys, I'm not to say that it's the Jesuits and that's I don't buy that, guys. I'm sorry. So I'm not going there with it. So if that's I appreciate that your opinion and things like that. But I don't like to draw broad, generalizations like that, to be honest with you, because I've personally found that there's quite a number of Jesuits that do the right thing, just as there's a lot of Jesuits that do the wrong thing. And so I try not to paint a broad brush. I don't say the Jews, I don't say the Jesuits, I don't say the Catholics, I don't say the Freemasons, I don't say any of that because it's all been said. And I think that that's a very and no criticism towards you. I just want you to know it's a bit, guys, that's part of the game. That is part of the MK Ultra game, is to get us to say these exact same those things to one another. And then somebody who's raised rigidly into a belief system that's rigidly Catholic or feels close to Catholicism, or a person that, they're Jewish and they know that they've never been part of it. It's like the second somebody says it's the Jews or it's the Jesuits or it's the whatever, it just pushes that person away and they go like, well, I'm dealing with a person that has a narrow perspective, blah, blah, blah. So again, I'm not suggesting that you are, guys, because I mean, Malachi Martin would even tell you there were problems within the Jesuits. There are people that are, from Hasidic and Orthodox Jewish communities that would have a lot of criticisms about people that they perceive to be false Jews that are promoting their beliefs in a way that they believe is a corruption or an inversion or a perversion. Okay. So that's the only reason why I made that comment. But again, I do respect what you're saying there, and I'm not trying to make you feel like whatever. Okay. That's just, I'm offering you my perspective. Okay. So please don't be offended there. That's not the point of it. I guess the point of it is for me I'm trying to be is not abrasive and offensive when I approach groups as a whole, even these two, because I don't know what the story is. This could be cover to stay safe. It could be, I don't know, but maybe what one person's doing is to reverse what the other person's doing, and they understand it at a high level. They just can't come out and say it. You see what I'm saying? So I don't claim that this is anything but a question that I have about why is it happening? That's all. And it's I would call it a benevolent challenge to say, if you care, then will you please take a little bit of time? Will you please take a little bit of time to review my material? Because some of these people, well, Rose McGowan specifically, she would be probably a few degrees away from things that happened to me. Okay. And people that I saw and cared about. Okay. So here's another playlist that I have, and it's called Occultism and Nazism in America, from Paperclip to Zodiac. And these are the clips that I'm going to be playing from. And Yeah, you know something, I'm not gonna do the MK Ultra one right away, I'll do that at the end. But I'm gonna review this material here. This is gonna be the core theme tonight, okay? Is these clips. And I'm gonna do my best to just let some of these go through, and then I'll wait till after they're done. But this is what I'm gonna take you through here is the history, okay? How I learned about it, why I know so much. This is my evidence. This is me stepping foot on the ground and saying to you guys, I'm not making this up. I went out there. I drove out to Northern California and Southern Oregon. I went to the grave sites of my relatives. I investigated. And my mother comes from Operation Paperclip Nazis. She was surrounded by them. There's no other way to put it. It doesn't mean she is one. It just means that it's curious to me then in all my years why I have a mother that never discussed Nazis but was surrounded by them. To me, knowing how deceptive my mother has been overall, she hid the man that abused all these kids effectively. There's no other way to put it. She allowed him to go away. They claim that they don't know how this happened or what the exact etymology of it was, but when I finally questioned my mother many years, well, a few years ago, I'd say, well, 2016 is when I began confronting her directly about these things. Her excuses were just lame and avoiding, obfuscating, worse than any of these people that are testifying, like from the FBI or the DEA, when they're being asked pointed questions, like all of the obfuscation and avoidance. I'm familiar with it. Like I experience it from these people and her in particular. Um, my mother was neglectful. It's the bizarre thing about her, you guys, is to the people that have been close to my family, like they knew she was a little bit of a challenging personality probably at times, but you never would have called her quote a bad mother because she did so many things right. I would argue though the things that she did right are the same things like a dog trainer does right. You don't want your dog to be all like, pissing on the floor and spilling things everywhere and dropping it, you know what I'm saying, or jumping on people. And so they learn to train you really well. You have good manners, you can speak well, you get a good education, you can really impress people for a while. But it doesn't equate necessarily to the kind of good mothering or compassion that you would hope it would translate to. It's training. It's more for their image and less and for them to work through you, and it has a hell of a lot less to do with their actual concern and love for you as a child. Because a mother that loves her child doesn't where however she got that child, whether it was from adoption or from natural birth, it doesn't matter. The role of her is to shield her children from this type of abuse and treatment. And my observation in my family was my mother basically fed me and some others to the lions. But we got a great education. We got good square meals on the table. We lived in a beautiful home. I was very blessed. Okay. How else do I say that, guys? Like, I don't want you thinking that it was this horrible, like, and chains and whips and crap like that. No, this person actually showed me a lot of like something that looked like love, but was really just sort of MK. The indifference. That yeah, good comment, straw man. That indifference is. Let me tell you something. That's their weapon. Their indifference to your condition. Their indifference to what they've done, and their complete lack of willingness to own up to it and make amends for it is part of their weapon on your mind. And that's why those of us that have figured it out have to let these people go. You can forgive them and move on, but don't let them keep you anchored in hatred and waiting for them to acknowledge it. They're not going to do it most of the time. That's been my experience. I keep going into loops of frustration over it, and it's designed to do that. Because the more you ruminate over these people and what they did, the less you're going to create for yourself and others and produce something that is going to end all this. That's what they want, is to keep you in this mental trap of being angry about what happened, no resolution, no justice, and then you're just stuck with the thought. And that's basically what it's been. And I experienced it very mildly. the reason I'm mostly upset is because I've seen the impact on the people that it did affect the most. And I'm not going to say who or what, but one of these people did approach me about 6 years ago, very frustrated, very upset, specifically at my mother and the way she was withholding certain information and certain things that would just help her move on spiritually. And I saw my mother's cruelty and how much she got off inside. Like there's this part of her that's really enjoying and getting fuel from withholding that and hurting her in that way. And that's offensive to me. It's incredibly offensive and obscene. It's a violation of trust. And I had to watch that person have all the relationships around them violated. All trust has been violated. It's never been safe for them. But illusory safety is all there. People looking from the outside in don't even know. You don't know how bad it is. You don't know what kind of prison that they're in because they look free. They're running around free, you think. That's MK Ultra in a nutshell. You have physical freedom, but your biofield, everything about your ideas and what you want to focus on and concentrate on are constantly controlled. And since the biofield brings everything in the physical matter, we have to heal that aspect too. All the psychoenergetics really plays into what I'm telling you here. So I'm going to start playing the video material. Sorry about the wind sound in this clip.
Everybody picking up on the research. So I started at the International Order of Oddfellows Cemetery back near Tule Lake and Hatfield areas. That's brought me through Tule Lake into the Tule Lake Segregation Center. This is where those prisoners of war from Germany were brought. So sorry about all the construction noise, but I'll just read this here. World War II valor in the Pacific National Monument was established in 2008 in part to serve as a reminder of the grave injustices endured by Japanese Americans incarcerated at the Tule Lake Segregation Center. The Tule Lake unit also preserves a portion of the tumultuous history of the United States from the 1930s to the end of the war. Through the stories of civilian conservation corps, enrollees, Japanese Americans, and prisoners of war were part of the history of Camp Tule Lake. The Tule Lake unit is a reminder to all Americans that the Constitution is no more than a piece of paper. The Tule Lake Segregation Center began in 1942 as one of the 10 war relocation centers. Initially, it held 1,276 of the approximately 120,000 women. So you can see. And then down there, not more importantly, excuse me, but as far as the research goes here, the 800 POWs. So it says, in 1944, after local farmers petitioned the U.S. government for additional farm labor, 150 Italian prisoners of war converted into the buildings into a POW camp. Soon, 800 German POWs arrived at the camp and worked in the Tule Lake Basin, helping local farmers tend and harvest their fields. So as far as the research that I'm doing, I've actually traced some of these family lines and, back as far as where they've gone and what they've done since, in some cases. And it's getting more and more interesting. So we're here in New Well, not far outside of Tule Lake.
Guys, I have maps of all that.
Everybody, I'm here in Klamath Falls, reporting from the International Order of Oddfellows Cemetery. I'm visiting some plots of people that were close to the story that I've been working on. I needed to be able to tell this story from the beginning, and it involves a lot of the International Order of Oddfellows and Rebeccas, not all, but some, and their impact on our culture and how that started and where it leads back to and who it leads back to. Who are the players?
So guys, I'm going to be straight up with you right here. I'm going to pause this very fast. This one I'm going to curate a little bit with my own commentary. That is the gravestone of Martha Catherine Pettigrew. If you go to the Merrill, Merrill, Oregon, IOOF cemetery, and it's labeled as such, this is a cemetery, guys, that so if you have all kinds of theories about the Freemasons, this is why you'll find that I have a whole different narrative compared to you. Okay. What I've learned is the people that are from this cemetery are all odd fellows and they're Rebeccas. It's another occult society that is well less known. And usually most people that I've run into have never even heard of them until they see my material, or they might have seen the logo someplace, but they just didn't know what it meant. And it's not until they see this that they realize, oh, that's what they are. Well, the Odd Fellows, they're not like the Freemasons, but they operate in a similar fashion. They have lodges all over the world. They meet together. They do all kinds of esoteric rituals. You know, they have levels that you can get to. But the Odd Fellows have just been way more hidden behind the scenes. They make themselves look more like it's a social club or fraternity. And I would say that it's a group that has a lot more female leaders and female dominance within it, which is to say that they have two separate groups that are the same, but they refer to themselves as Odd Fellows. It's called the Independent Order of Odd Fellows, IOOF. That's the name of the cemetery. It's called IOOF Cemetery, and that's what it stands for. And so that means you basically need to be an Odd Fellow or a part of the Rebecca order. Rebecca spelled with a K-H, so it's Rebekah. And I'll be talking about those groups more as this material goes. But I learned that my mom's multi-generational Rebecca. So these female-dominated cults, and you're seeing a lot of the signs of this now, guys, that they have higher ranking and higher order within the, whatever. So, if you know of a movie there, Strawman, it's about the Rebeccas and the Oddfellows, please tell me, because I have yet to find that anybody besides me has talked about them in this way, in any way that's meaningful. And usually when I do, I will get like a stream of Oddfellows that will like comment and say, like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's just this. We don't do any of these things. There's no Nazis here. All right, that's fine. Again, I don't call all of them Nazis. I don't say those things about any group. So anyways, hang on. All right. So anyways, that's Martha C. Pettigrew. Let me see if I can increase the resolution here. Yeah. And guys, this woman, in my research, and I don't really care what the family says. When I review history, everything about her connection to adoptions and the way that kids got acquired and her role in it stinks to high heaven. And I can't say any more than that. I'll just put it this way. I'm aware of a child that she and James Pettigrew, who's a child abuser, were put in charge of going to pick up in a foreign country and bring back. And when I review the details of that, I'm going, why wasn't it these other people that went and picked up that child? It should have been them. Why was it these people? And I don't want to say any more about that because it gets too whatever specific. Oh, there's the William H. Cemetery. So you guys might have seen my slide on William H. Macy looking like Dan Daria. That's probably something to pay attention to, but I don't want to go into all that type of material right now. William H. Macy, Dan Daria.
William H. For the record, I knew Zona Wilson, and she was always really nice to me.
Yeah, guys, just to give you some context, I actually visited Zona Wilson before she died. I knew her when I was a little kid, and it was actually James Pettigrew, the child abuser, that would take me and also Martha on the other side that took me to see her. And the one thing I will tell you is that whatever these people were into, Zona Wilson was pretty sweet natured and was nice to me. So I don't know what her role is, if anything, and what her knowledge is, but I can't really have negative things to say. She always, I remember she used to say, look at those big brown eyes. Like, she always loved my eyes, and she would always be really nice to me. There was nothing sinister there, and I am aware that something bad happened to Zona, and I was given a direct admission. Um, this is what makes this all horrible, guys. I can't even, like, if I even told you what happened to her, I'm stuck, guys. Like, I have to say things to you that would make you cry if I told you how bad it was. It's the kind of shit that it traumatizes me, and I don't want to put that kind of image or idiot or thoughts in your head. But James Pettigrew was pretty horrible, and he bragged about having done something pretty horrible to Zona, and that he got away with it. And that's a big part of his character, was abusing people, doing horrible things to people, and how much of a thrill he got that nobody did shit about it. He's very Zodiac killer. The Zodiac killer was the same way, trolling everybody, constantly poking. And I'm wondering if that's why I've had such a weird, like, I'm hunting this Zodiac killer. It's strange, guys, how many connections I find to the Zodiac killer and all these things, because the technique of traumatizing and anchoring and then trolling is all there. Okay.
So again, guys, this isn't me coming up here and showing you some names and trying to be salacious. I'm not going to tell you that any of these names of these people or their families are bad. That's not my point. In fact, that's not even the goal here. It's just that I need to talk about our family history more openly, so that we can solve the problem. And we're talking about history, okay? But it's serious. And the names that I'm tracking back and the locations all seem to center around this area, the impact that the Hatfield-Tule Lake area had on our culture after World War II. I'm going to visit another location if I can that's nearby, because it's relevant. They housed some Japanese prisoners there. And then I believe after that, it was used as a German, excuse me. The assumption would be Nazi, but I shouldn't say that. It actually was a German internment camp.
It was Nazi,
after that,
guys, but they don't call it that.
I think it's logical to say that if you look at the timelines and to see when the Project Paperclip or Operation Paperclip, I forget which one, if you were to look into when the Project Paperclip scientists were transferred from Germany to the United States after World War II, you probably see a lot of correlations between both this area and parts of Eastern Washington, because they would have absorbed those engineers into the nuclear program and into the energy program, because that's where their expertise was.
That's their Ellis Island.
Paperclip is where, after World War II, we agreed to take in a bunch of the German, assumingly Nazi scientists and high-ranking military brass that had given up because they wanted to take what they knew, sciences-wise and knowledge-wise, which is formidable. What these people know about electromagnetics, it's esoteric in nature. It's gone back, I don't want to say just decades. We're talking about over a century. The techniques that were being perfected by Tesla, they didn't even originate with him. And a lot of the people that knew how to do it settled here, okay, in this area. This was their area. Those Nazi scientists, this is where they came. This is where they settled. And, logically, changed their names. If you're a Project Paperclip Nazi scientist and you went by Oppenheimer, or something, or Goebbels, you know, and everybody in the United States knew that, you'd probably want to change your name. You probably wouldn't want it to be overly Germanic unless you looked pretty German. You'd want it to be something innocuous that might, you know, be a sign of what you do for a living. Some of these people, for example, you know, like Schumacher, they make shoes. Miller, they make mill. You know, they mill things.
Hey, guys, what I'm telling you is that the Nazis basically just blended in here. They went into these families. They kind of took their histories, made it their own, and they've done this rinse repeat all over the place now. Like, you really don't even know who's who from what family anymore, because the Nazis will just come in, they'll marry maybe one or two members of a family, and then they completely change the history of it. And so it was easy to do decades ago, going from the 40s up until about the 80s. But once the internet came on board in the 90s, that's why all my material tells you, like, guys, don't you understand that was the end game? That they knew at some point information availability was going to be accelerated to where we could research all these things. So once they got control over all the central IP routes in the American internet via Science Applications International Corporation, that was a huge part of it. Then they populated it with lots of bogus records. They got access to Social Security Administration, the Human Genome Project, all of it. And you don't really know what the real history of anything is.
Things about Operation Paperclip, and just to provide a little bit of alternative narratives to some of the existing information about those programs. In my research, it seems like a lot of this leads back to the Tule Lake area and the segregation camp that was out there that housed the German POWs and also had some of the Nazi scientists, presumably in the surrounding communities at the time. I believe that once I'm through with this material, I'll be able to draw some pretty clear correlations between, you know, very specific family names, although I'm not sure I'm going to get quite into that material exactly online, but I will be able to draw clear correlations between things that are going on in our country right now in this specific region and some of the history that dates back to World War II. In order to do so, though, we're going to have to talk about colloquialisms. And these are just sort of like phrases and the etymology of words that are kind of specific to certain regions, like rural communities, for example. So, like, you know, maybe in parts of the country where it's more southern or rural, they might say things like, well, you know, man, that's just how we do, you know. And that might be the same phraseology that maybe in the north they might say, yeah, that's how we do things around here. Meaning, you know, that's how things are done. That's how things are accomplished, you know, to be more specific. So the reason why that's important is because colloquialisms are sort of a way to hide phraseology and words in ways that only people in specific areas or regions would understand, especially in the United States, because the English language is pretty malleable. You know, you can kind of, a lot of slang and things like that associated with it, and colloquialisms are a part of that. And a lot of those colloquialisms originate with some of the secret societies, like, you know, the Freemasons, Oddfellows, Rebecca's, things like that. And so as we're talking about etymology of words, etymology being, you know, like, how did they get formed? How did they get passed from one group to the other? How did this language or the reconstruction of this language occur? And one specific word is shenanigans, right? That's another word that I guess you could say would have like a etymology that could be traced back. I'm not sure exactly where shenanigans traces back to. That'd be a whole different topic for another presentation. But I thought it was relevant to this discussion because what I'm trying to do is help law enforcement do their jobs better and help them help.
Dude, white boy, I just saw your thing about the Khazars, and just, you know, like the whole Ashkenazi and Khazarian thing. You're not really that wrong. So you're not being inflammatory by saying that. I guess what would be inflammatory is if you made assumptions about the intention of an entire group. Like, just because you were born into something doesn't mean you're going to take that on as your personal mission. So, and you're not doing that. So your statement's completely okay. So don't apologize. You're cool. That's what this type of forum is for, so that we can intelligently discuss these things in a way that, you know, demonstrates compassion, isn't like finger pointing. I haven't seen anybody do that in this room. All I've ever done is try to explain to you, like, if I have a different way of looking at it, or if you don't see me like doing it in a way that's more aggressive at times, because sometimes I do, guys, I go there sometimes, but yeah. So your statement, I was scrolling through while this was playing. Sorry to interrupt it, guys, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with pointing out things like the Khazarians and some of the Ashkenazi things and saying, listen, I don't know what's what, but is is this group authentic? Is it okay if we present the question? And what I try to do, just so you know, my way of dealing with this, because it comes from a sincere place. Like I would welcome people that have Judaism in their belief system to have a conversation with me so I can understand it better. But I would want there to be representation, and I want to do this, guys. If I can get a more meaningful platform with more whatever, I want to have those kinds of discussions. I want to bring people on and say, like, okay, you are Orthodox and you're Hasidic, or you come from a group that's more with the Ashkenazi form that studies the Talmud and Yiddish, and then you're more about Hebrew and the Torah. And like I'm trying to even understand what all these things mean as an outsider looking in. And 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 so I respectfully, because, and really, guys, there's a part of me that I feel close to Jewish mysticism. It's informed a lot of the things that I've learned and helped me understand it way better. And I actually want to continue that schooling in a more meaningful way, but I don't know where to go. You see what I'm saying? Like I'm looking for the truth, and I just want to make sure that whoever I align with when it comes to that particular issue, no matter what perspective they come from, is coming from an authentic place internally, that they and that they're going to have a similar mindset to me so that we can have a productive dialogue. That's what I would be aiming for. So if I can ever make that happen, I'll do it, because that's really the kind of place that I want to go with this channel, is more awareness and understanding, people having like go, oh, now I get it. That's what I want it to be. I don't want it to be us in loops of anger or whatever, and that's anyways, guys, I won't go deep into that, but
provide support to them. So I want them to understand that I'm a person that has the work that they do at heart, and that I care about them getting good information through which to do their jobs. And that it goes across the board for people in all forms of law enforcement and our intelligence agencies. I want everybody to have good quality information through which to do their jobs. And so when I started discovering what I thought to be some telecom and energy exploits that could potentially tie back to this region, I wanted to be able to discuss it in a way that was both, open, but to where I could just get through it to the point where I don't have to constantly discuss, etymology, colloquialisms, how these things tie back to certain secret societies. We have to get past that discussion very quickly. Otherwise, people are going to roll their eyes and go, oh no, it's another thing about the Freemasons, or oh no, and that's not where I'm coming from with any of this. I don't have a problem with any of these groups. Again, I know that this is how things got done historically. So I'm not going to be a person that tells you yay for these groups or boo or any of those things. That's not my goal. Okay. But in light of that, an example of a colloquialism and a use in modern, I guess, entertainment would be the movie Super Troopers. They use the word shenanigans. And this is just something that, like a group of me and people that I used to know, we used to talk about this as like a concept, about shenanigans, like how some people have a really wicked sense of humor where they just really don't know when to stop, and they're kind of like just brutal with it. Like it just goes beyond the level of being fun. Sometimes you're just messing around, you're poking fun, and it's not that big a deal, and you're just trying to like maybe smooth the rough edges off a person's personality. That's kind of like good shenanigans. But like evil shenanigans is when somebody just kind of transfers. It's not even shenanigans. So that's kind of what the movie talks about. It's like, hey man, our shenanigans are cheeky and fun, and they're just saying like, yeah, we just play pranks. We like to help people move along a little bit by messing with them. This other guy, he's just brutal and violent. He's just lashing out at people. They're talking about one of their coworkers, and so they're just trying to like draw a distinction, like, hey man, don't lump us in with those Martians. We're different. We're not like them. And so I want people out there to know that I acknowledge that. I know there's a lot of people out there that they're not doing anything wrong, and I don't think that they are. So I don't want to see a bunch of people that are involved with the Oddfellows or the Rebeccas or the Freemasons get lumped in with a bunch of people that are exploiting some of their methods of communicating in a way that wouldn't be in keeping with their traditions. And if you understand the way the Nazi Party worked, this is classic Nazi methodology. And so, as I'm talking about Operation Paperclip, what you understand, as I mentioned this in my last report, is during World War II, they were taking over Freemasonic lodges. So one has to assume that if you had a cluster of people that were POWs from Germany and they were still employing the same strategy, they would have tried to gain access to, you know, Oddfellow orders, Rebecca orders, Freemasonic lodges, because those are really your way in every single town. And if once you have access to those areas, then you understand that those people a lot of times were in charge of, you know, caves, tunnel systems. And in this region, you know, you can look this up. There's a lava bed national monuments and things like that. The cave systems are vast and they're everywhere. So these were the keepers of the caves. And so you can understand why during Operation Paperclip, as we imported these scientists around 1945, that this would have been a key area that they would have wound up. Yet in our official history, there doesn't seem to be anything that traces back to that. So all I'm trying to do is offer you an alternative narrative based on personal experience, things that I've witnessed myself. I've actually gone to these cemeteries. I've looked at these things. I've studied these societies. I have quite a few family members that were part of these esoteric societies. And at least one has actually told me to my face that they remember. Okay. So that's why, you know, it's important that I be able to discuss this openly so that you understand that I'm not just a guy that's, you know, screaming conspiracy. It's far from it, actually. I don't have any problems with these groups. There's quite a bit of things that I like about them. I'm certain that I've spent a considerable amount of time with people that were Rebeccas or Oddfellows or Freemasons who just didn't tell me at the time because I didn't ask. And, you know, we got along great. So no problems there. And still, I'm not an enemy of any of these organizations. If anything, what I'd like to do is just make sure that those who are just doing what they should be doing are not given greater scrutiny or judged unfairly than deservedly. So, in keeping with that, I went out to what's a community called Merrill, Oregon, which is really close to the Oregon and California border. And at Merrill, at the intersection of Cemetery and Anderson Road, pretty close to there, is a independent, sorry I say international, but it's independent order of Oddfellow Cemetery. And so I went out there and I actually kind of walked around and took a look and shot a lot of video footage and pictures of the headstones. I didn't think it would be appropriate for me to put that footage in this presentation, but I do have it, and I just out of respect for family members. But I would say that those looking for some key pieces to the puzzle, you should really study the IOOF Merrill Cemetery very well and understand the origins of the families, potentially, and their connection to the POW camp at the Tule Lake Segregation Center. Because in my research, that seems to play heavily into this. Now, if you go out on Tule Lake, you'll notice that, and this is true about all these communities, a lot of numerology and angles and triangles in particular. Now, this is common to esoteric societies. There's things they do with ley lines, energy lines, the way that caves and volcanic systems tend to travel, and how they try to follow natural volcanic lines. Things that they do with ley line and grid energy, all part of these groups and their esoteric knowledge. Tule Lake, well, after you leave Merrill and you head south, you head on 39 to Highway 50, and then 50 connects to 139, and 139 connects to 113. So just to give you a quick primer into, you know, why you need to start paying more attention to this is because in 139 equals ACI, and then you'll notice that the Tule Lake Segregation Center is right off the intersection of Highway 139 and 113. AAC. Okay, so just try to keep this in mind, alphanumerics, because these things are going to play into our discussions in the future. Because what the Oddfellows and Rebeccas do is they shuffle and they do alphanumerics and they do 3-ring ciphers. And so keep that in mind and think of this like a puzzle, 113, 139, okay? Now, the history that's official out in this area is that we brought in some Italian and German POWs around 1944. That would have been about a year before Operation Paperclip officially brought in a bunch of scientists. So again, I do understand that there's been a lot of books written about this in Operation Paperclip, and there's been an extensive list of even some of the scientists. But I do think that there's a bit of a smokescreen there, and that some of this data has been seeded basically to throw people off because, again, I think there's good legitimate security reasons for wanting to hide some of the family members of these Nazi scientists, especially, like if they had children and things like that. We wouldn't want to have any assumptions that, the child of a Nazi scientist would be involved with any nefarious activities. However, if you had a family that came from Nazi roots and those Nazi roots stayed steadfast in their current theology, that would indicate that they're not really living as Americans. They're still living as a dissident. They're living as a person that's actually an enemy of the United States. So we have to be able to distinguish, who is actually here in support of the United States as a sovereign nation and who might be serving this agenda that they never really let go of between World War II and now. And there seems to be a lot of evidence out there that that's happening, that there really does seem to be some people that are moving towards a Fourth Reich in the United States. And they have a lot of exploits into Hollywood, into very specific networks and very specific television shows and studios. And I'm not going to be able to talk about these things in detail unless we've had a very frank discussion about everything that I've just talked about. We need to be able to talk about the Tule Lake Segregation Center. We need to be able to talk about the very real impact that bringing these Nazis in to this camp during World War II had. We need to talk about some of the reasons why we weren't given 100% of the history involving some of the Operation Paperclip scientists. Now, I'm going to save the next part for another presentation, but start thinking about Oddfellows, Rebecca's, Freemasons, Nazis during World War II, what their strategy was as far as taking over Europe, and how that might have translated over to here. Because what could have happened, and what we need to start at least discussing openly more, is that they just started a quiet coup once they arrived. And once they integrated themselves into the Department of Energy, into NASA, JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab, and our defense industry, they were able to seize a lot of control. And it appears that that control carries through to today, especially when it comes to disinformation, especially when it comes to seeding our records with completely false histories. I'm really, in my own research, beginning to understand, especially when it comes to Operation Paperclip, that while there are an enormous amount of accurate statements and things discussed within Operation Paperclip, they really don't go far enough in the official discussion as far as talking about all the different areas where these people wound up. And we need to have a more open discussion about this starting today. And I hope you'll stick with me as I work through this material. And we're going to start getting more into connections between these orders and Hollywood. Thanks. Okay, before getting into this discussion.
Yeah, sorry guys. I haven't been monitoring the comments the whole time. I had to go make some, I made some tea because I don't want to drink coffee this late. But I needed something to warm my throat there a little bit while I'm talking. So yeah, I just scrolled through everything and some really good comments here. Yeah, I know. I mean, guys, yeah, I get it. There's like groups that existed before this, but I mean, we could keep going back hundreds and hundreds of years, and you guys know more about that than I do. I'm just trying to bring it to you from 1945 on, and the rest we can talk about at another time. In fact, I mean, generational history, it's interesting, and we definitely would want to know, if you don't know your past, you don't know your future. I don't know. In some way, I guess, I think if you don't know your past, in our case, we won't know how to get back our future. So maybe I should look into, think of it that way. But yeah, really good comments there. And a lot of what you're saying resonates with me there. And I'll look up that portion of the Bible because if you want to email me or something like that and give me some specific parts of the Bible or some religious like links that I could go investigate that more on, or I would appreciate it, because I don't have that background and on what you talked about there, with the the Phoenicians and the Essens and that kind of thing. So, and that has been a topic of discussion amongst people close to me lately, when we've been having these, going over these things. So I would be curious to know what you know, and I'm going to keep playing this. This one's about modern Nazi influence in the U.S., the OTO, and things like that. And the various corruptions of like these sort of ancient traditions, that seem to be funneled through modern Nazism. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this all goes back beyond Blavatsky, and that part I'm kind of familiar with. How much of it's real history versus seeded history, I really don't know. I wonder sometimes how many of these things that are allegedly from a couple hundred years ago just were populated into our modern internet sometime in the early 90s, when they were trying to cover up history. So that every time you went to the truth machine, the internet, instead of an actual paper book that was written like, 100 years ago or decades ago, we begin to accept these hundreds years old histories from the internet as quote truth, when sometimes they were seeded there about 30 years ago. So it's just something to consider, guys, because I've found this quite frequently, and it's made me really question a lot of things, because I was like, why didn't I hear about that in school? Is it because the truth machine is right? Or is it that it's just a new narrative that's been pushed in front of us, and we've been told to accept globally? That's all, guys, because I see a lot of bogus information in Wikipedia. Sorry that I use Wikipedia so much, guys, but I mean, what am I going to start with? They have good slides, they have good visuals. So I kind of start there and I go, okay, here's what Wikipedia says, but here's the things that I've learned. That's what all these articles are, pretty much.
About the Nazi breeding programs in the United States. I just wanted to kind of go over just briefly the occult connection between Heinrich Himmler, Adolf Hitler, and some of the rumors that there was also a connection to Aleister Crowley. I don't know how true that was, but just for the sake of argument here, I think most people who've studied the Nazi Party do understand that there was a high level of occultism at the highest ranks. And whether or not that originated with Aleister Crowley, I can't tell you definitively. I wasn't there, but I do know that this was something that was practiced, and it was very important to Himmler. And it says, according to Wikipedia, at least.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick pause to just say that you just blew my mind, straw man. I'm going to find that movie, because that is trippy, because that's how they do it. This is how they cover up all these things. This is how they cover up the connection between the Pettigrews, the Oddfellows. They make some movie that has a theme that kind of touches on it, but obviously isn't about the topic. And then when you go to do a web search on, James J. Pettigrew, Martha Pettigrew, the Oddfellows, the Children of God, instead of getting those things matching, you get the movie, because the movie gets talked about on the internet more than my story that gets buried. Get how it works now? Data corruption 101. They're experts at obfuscation. That would be a part of it. If that's a modern film and it didn't exist like a long time ago, especially, oh my God, I would absolutely say that it falls into that category. And I want to know who the producers, directors, and writers are, because, yeah, I bet you when you dig deep into that one, you're going to find lots of connections to the people covering this all up. Okay. And I'm telling you, the things that I've been revealing, especially about James Pettigrew, Martha Pettigrew, in that Bothell neighborhood, ever since 2016, they are putting out shitty movie after shitty movie after, it's 2010. Wow. Okay. Well, that was before I started talking. So there's timelines, but we won't go there right now. But yeah, you blew my mind.
Least that Himmler was interested in mysticism and the occult from an early age, and that he tied this interest into his racist philosophy, looking for proof of Aryan and Nordic racial superiority from ancient times. And he promoted a cult of ancient ancestor worship, particularly amongst members of the SS, as a way to keep the race pure and provide immortality to the nation. And I think that last part about immortality is key, because that does seem to be something that, in addition to being interested in the esoteric societies, it seemed like the end game really was immortality. I mean, what's the ultimate weapon? And if you're looking for the ultimate weapon, immortality is going to be it, right? So if you're thinking in terms of what they were trying to accomplish with immortality and weaponizing that, how that would integrate into esoteric concepts like sex magic, which was practiced by the OTO, otherwise known as Ordo Templi Orientis, which has a lot of history here in the United States. And so that's important to remember here, because as we're talking about the influence of Nazism on cults in the United States, we need to think about, who came over during Project Paperclip, what kind of values did they have, and what would they have been promoting? Because Hitler was trying to create a new world religion that would be rooted in paganism. You can watch documentaries about Hitler and the Nazi Party over and over again. I've watched many. This is a common theme, is that he was trying to create a religion that was not based out of Christianity or anything else like that. It was actually about paganism, more specifically the changing of seasons. It was really just, going to boil down to ley lines and changing of seasons and things of that nature. But that also falls in line with paganisms and things that are involved with OTO sex magic. And once you also understand that some of the earliest practitioners of OTO sex magic in the United States were also connected to our early NASA project, people like Jack Parsons and the Jet Propulsion Lab, which, the research from the jet fuel that was developed there went on to, drive our missions to the moon and things like that. So you can see a lot of genesis leading back to specifically to sex magic and Nazi breeding programs. So before we start talking about, how that transitioned into cults here in the United States, I just wanted to put this out here as a brief primer. Encourage people to go out there and look up these things involving the OTO, Thelema, and the connection to Adolf Hitler, Heinrich Himmler, and Nazi mysticism, because it's all going to play into their theology and the breeding programs as they've been implemented in the United States, as I hypothesize here. And what you're going to find is there's been a common model here where it wasn't just that Hitler was trying to move things into paganism, like transition them from other religions into more of a cycling of seasons. He was also very much interested in polygamy. And you can understand why that would be necessary for what they were trying to do, or why they would see that as necessary. If they're trying to weaponize basically breeding for the sake of immortality, then selective breeding is going to be a critical part of that. So what I'm trying to get people to think about in advance of the next presentation that I do is how that ideology would have played into the development of cults, and how they've developed different shades of this method of integrating polygamy, a new world religion, but not so much as a way to hoodwink. Well, part of it's for psychological warfare, but really when you get down to it, it's because they really want to be in control of the breeding in any given area. And this is one method of doing it. And as I move into the next material, I want people to understand I'm not going to suggest to you that every single parts of these groups that I'm going to talk about have Nazi roots. I'm just merely suggesting that, discussing as a template of how Nazis were into eugenics and selective breeding, that plays into their influence after they moved into the United States during Project Paperclip or Operation Paperclip, and how those Nazi scientists had this as an ideology. And when they were joining Freemasonic lodges, when they were joining the Odd Fellow lodges, when they were integrating themselves into our society, they were bringing with them these values that did encourage polygamy, that did encourage moving religion away from things like Christianity or Judaism and into paganism. And OTO sex magic was a part of that. So understanding that these are people that would integrate sexual practice and grid energy, meaning like hilltops, ley lines, it would be important for them to do some of their magic work in specific locations, specifically hilltops and mountaintops and things like that. Himmler's castle in Germany was another location. It's also been rumored that we had some U.S. Members who are trying to recreate some of those Heinrich Himmler rituals in that castle. I don't know if that's true.
That was actually, guys, I said in the article here, I don't know if that was true. Well, when I made that article, I didn't know if that was a true story or not. And then I've shown on my live stream before that it is a true story, that Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino of the Psychological Warfare Division, and also a practicing Satanist, He founded the Temple of Set. He used to be a high-ranking member and some would argue a founder, but not really, of the Church of Satan. And he's the one that replicated the Himmler Castle ritual and in Nazi regalia and everything. So that did happen. He admitted to it. It was done with military support. And I would argue that there could be another reason why they would have done that, as misguided as I think it was. It could be because they believe that the rituals work and they're trying to replicate it to find out what it does. Again, in doing the replication, what are you getting yourself into? It's a little bit like, even if you thought that he was doing it for a good reason, which I doubt Aquino was, because he kind of admits to being what he is, that there would still be a danger in doing it because you could absorb the energy. So what I was just telling you about OTO, hilltops, and sex magic, I mean, that's all part of everything we're talking about here, guys. It's what anchors it. When you put the DNA signatures of person's bioplasma and trauma, the DOR, it traps, guys. It literally, it places it into the soil. It's like slow death. It's like blood dripping into the soil, but it's your plasma, your life energy is anchored to the location through the ritual. And sexual magic in particular, especially when binded to trauma, they get a double whammy of what they're looking for when it comes to influence and binding to locations. The energy goes into the earth cavity. That's what part of where the plasma travels. And again, that's the trauma signature. That's dormant orgone or dark orgone radiation that has the plasma attached to it, that when they visualize the symbols, now these symbols have more power. They'll resonate stronger. The orgasm emission places that symbol off into the ionosphere, where it travels to the ionospheric cavity, and that's bioplasma too. So you see what they do here. It's like the foundation in the building is the DOR trauma, and then the POR spectrum of the orgasm, it confuses the person because of these two dynamics, right? It's these completely different opposites. It splits their personality, and because it's ritualistic, all of the symbols involving thelema and all those other things are reinforced and made more powerful. If it's Nazism, then yeah, they're going to have things that make Nazism stronger. So
true, but we've had a lot of history that dates back to these methodologies that were used by the Nazis. So I would encourage people, prior to me getting to this next bit of material, which I'm going to be getting into soon in the next couple parts, is to start studying these topics involving the theology of Hitler and eugenics as a way to take over nations, and think of it less as racial purity, because even though they obviously had an ideology in that direction, I think what you're going to find was it was more about gaining control, and it was probably more about what they had learned about life extension and what they were trying to do with immortality that motivated their actions. So thank you for watching, and I'll have the next material out shortly. Thanks.
Yeah, and while this is going to the next clip, don't ever forget, guys, modern Nazism doesn't see race.
All right, just picking up where we left off on the...
Well, let me put it this way. That's not entirely true. What I'm saying is they welcome all races into modern Nazism, and it's a hierarchical structure and it's a belief system. And a lot of people are participating in it and they don't even know it. I would even call, like what just happened at the Oscars, that is so classic mass resonance manipulation, symbolic communication. It's doing all of it. I don't even want to, we're not going to talk about that event here. I shouldn't have brought it up. It's such a stupid thing to even focus on. But the point is that like one of those people involved with that has been a big promoter of racial, like trying to cause problems, saying that, well, we don't get our say and we don't do whatever. It's like, okay, that's fine. I mean, that's okay to assert that because there has been some degree of unfairness in our country, and I'm not going to deny that. But they put some of these people in charge that are a lot closer to Scientology. And again, Scientology has its roots in this. L. Ron Hubbard was studying OTO sex magic in such a way, guys, that even Aleister Crowley was like, you're weird, dude. Get away from me. Now, if you can make Aleister Crowley say that you're off the Richter scale weird, then you're doing something weird, because this guy basically defined weird.
connections to OTO, eugenics, and breeding programs, and how they might be influencing modern cults and the occult science of cults, really. So, starting, I want to refer back to some presentations that I did using the Defense Intelligence Agency report on controlled offensive behavior. I'll leave a link to it inside the comments, or rather my description section here, but I'm just going to read through this really quick. This is from an actual report that I downloaded from the Freedom of Information Act library on CIA.gov, involving the concept of mass resonance manipulation, which is effectively, what we would call mind control today, psychological warfare. And just going to read through this briefly. This is from the actual document. The science of mass manipulation plays a major role in modern warfare, at least theoretically. In past wars, a hostile confrontation between two parties was a diplomatic duel or a military battle, which was based on and regulated in general by classical concepts of acceptable military conduct. But this concept has changed. In modern warfare, there is a powerful third force which has, perhaps, the most decisive bearing on the outcome of any diplomatic or military confrontation today. The third force is the manipulated mass, individuals who, by modern mass communications media, have been welded into a solid front holding the same or very similar opinions. This third force conflicts with and ultimately controls the hostile confrontation by applying its criteria rather than the older criteria of acceptable diplomatic and military conduct. The study of these criteria is also the task of opinionology. The source again cited as a case in point the war in Vietnam. According to older classical concepts of warfare, the Vietnamese, including the North Vietnamese, should have sided with the Americans who were fighting in Vietnam to liberate the Vietnamese from threat of communist oppression and mass terror. Instead, the Vietnamese masses have been welded opinionologically into believing that they are fighting for their freedom and national independence against a foreign invader, whereas in reality they are fighting the Americans to be eventually enslaved by the communists. Keep in mind this report was written in 1972. Source believes that this situation is an obvious result of American ignorance and manipulating mass media. By ignoring mass opinion, both American and the world, the Americans have maneuvered themselves into the position of an invading foreign power in the eyes of the opinionologically indoctrinated Vietnamese. The study of the pattern of mass manipulation and mass resonance is based on a new scientific approach to psychology known as structural psychology, and this is important as we're discussing these terms. The psychology which is also taught in the West rejects the classic psychology, which devotes itself exclusively to the individual. According to structural psychology, the individual is conceived as a derivative of the higher groups which condition and mold his existence. These groups are the intimate microgroup, the social microgroup, the social molding group, and the basic structuring group. According to structural psychology, the phenomenology of the individual is considered to be a reflection of the phenomenology of these four groups. The study of mass resonance is concerned with the fourth group. Of the different methods of investigating the pattern of this group, opinionology is one of the most rewarding and most commonly used. All right, so the point of this is that as a method of psychological warfare and as a wartime weapon, this was basically studying the concept of mass resonance manipulation, the molding of opinions and ideas within a large group in order to win them over. It's, stopping the war before the war even has a chance to begin. So there are some key terms that they use. I'm not going to go over every one of these and read over them, but you can access the document, you can read it yourself. Just start to get familiar with these terms involving opinionology. What is a structured mass versus an unstructured mass? So I think we can go over those, right? So an unstructured mass consists of large numbers of individuals whose standards of values have been disturbed to a point approaching disintegration, so that the values have become ambiguous as a result. In other words, the reactions concerning individuals are not homogeneous to the mass and therefore cannot weld the mass into an integrated whole. So this is also a method of psychological warfare to isolate, your target. And so you can see how if they're trying to change a group, structured mass and unstructured mass as psychological warfare concepts are critical.
And then once you understand that, then you kind of see how that plays into how there's been a quiet coup that has partially involved potentially religious groups, cults, churches, wherein they've learned that this is a way to control very large groups of populations and move them over and towards a new belief system. And so I just wanted to introduce you to these things as terms because I'm going to start getting more personal with the information, I guess, and talking more about, different types of cults and religious movements. And so before I did that, I just wanted to give this as a primer to discuss the science of it, so that as I start talking about a few groups here, and I'm going to be going over them in more detail next, I'm just going to be talking about how there's a scientific concept here of basically the occult, which is hidden science of cults and religious movements. And I'm going to be using 3 different groups that I've been studying recently. 2 that I wasn't that familiar with, except for what I'd seen on the internet or heard in reports or watching a couple documentaries. And another one whose story that I've been tracing the etymology of a little bit closer, because this group was very close to me. One of them was very close to me as a child. And so I had a more personal interest in studying the etymology of that group and, where they came from and that kind of thing. So, but I want you to start thinking about the scientific concept of mass resonance manipulation, and also the concept of what they call love bombing. And so love bombing is defined as an attempt to influence a person by demonstrations of attention and affection. And it can be used in different ways and can be used for either a positive or negative purpose. So love bombing, it's basically these the spheres of influence, right? The flower of life, where you have one sphere in the center. You want to gain influence over that individual as the sphere, then to surround them and quote unquote love bomb them. Or, and in other ways, another method would be just to, harass them or whatever. But again, this is about structuring mass using human behavior as its model and how that feeds into our daily lives, activities, and perceptions. So I want to split this off into pieces so I don't try to do too much at once, but I'll leave links so you can study mass resonance manipulation. I'd encourage you to look into that part of my report prior to me getting too far into this, but I'll leave links to that as well. And we're going to talk next about 3 examples of this. The Source family, who doesn't really have that much of a troubling history, as far as public reports and everything like that. And then we're going to talk about the Children of God, or the Family International, who has had reports of having a troubling history. And then the Love family, otherwise known as the Church of Jesus Christ at Armageddon, who has kind of mixed reports. So I'm going to be using these 3 things as examples. And I just want the people that are potentially who have been members of these groups or currently or historians of it to know that I'm not here to judge or cast blame or anything like that on individuals or anything like that, or to cast all these groups of people as the same. I think that each one of these groups has very different shades of behaviors and acceptance levels. And so I'm not here to tell you that these are 3 the same thing. I don't actually even think that. I just want you to know that eugenics and selective breeding seems to be a common theme behind a lot of these movements that involve religious groups and cults. So that's going to be next, and I really appreciate your time. Thanks.
All right. So I just want to briefly show you something real quick. All right. Let's see. So part of what got me raising an eyebrow was about who's who and how far this goes, and then specifically the whole Rose McGowan thing. I'm kind of good at just knowing like how the bloodlines connect, right? And if you take a look at that photo, that's Steve Allen and that's Jane Meadows. Why is that relevant? If you remember in the very beginning of this presentation, if you've been here the whole time, you'll see it says the Love Family Cult, Steve Allen and son Brian Allen. this is basically, I don't know how legitimate this is, guys, but it kind of works this way. Steve Allen will be like, "Oh, my son, he left and went to this weird religious cult." And then the son goes like, "Yeah, I was disillusioned from my father for a while, but now we're back and the cult's over." But the whole thing was child trafficking. The entire cult was drug trafficking, child trafficking. It was a cover for it. And so what Hollywood does is, again, the concerned dad playing his role, Steve Allen, the son who was directly in the organization that was doing everything. I'm not saying he's a trafficker. I'm telling you that he was. If he's not one, I promise you he's surrounded by people that were dipping their foot, if not completely using that cult as a cover to do said things. Now, again, these aren't the people that you find out in Hollywood right now or would even care about. Most people would not even talk about this. And but the reason I know, guys, is because this guy in particular, Brian Allen, he would have had to have been part of the Washington and Oregon aspect of it, which is where I'm from. And the Love Family cult specifically calls themselves the Love Israel cult. All right. I need to give you an article on that before I get into the next part. I'm going to actually play the Love Family Israel thing first so that you can see the corruption. None of these people are Jewish. None of them practice Jewish services or anything, but they do mirror Jewish people. They do things that are similar, and they'll take on similar names. For example, in their cult, Brian, I can't remember who he became, Logic. See, Brian Allen is a very logical person. So what the cult would do is say, "Okay, Brian, you welcome to the Church of Jesus Christ at Armageddon, aka the Love Israel family. I am Love Israel. You are going to take away your name, Brian Allen, and now you're a logical guy. So we're going to name you Logic Israel." And they called them that not because of Jewish beliefs, guys. I know, I can show you proof of this. They called themselves that because it was a pun. Love is real. So, like this. So this guy named Paul Erdman changed his name to Love Israel. Brian Allen changed his name to Logic Israel, meaning logic is real. Does that make more sense? So when I learned that was the cult that I basically had surrounding me as a kid, and that, we'd leave Bothell and then we went to the farm, like, hours away from there near Hanford Reservation. And none of these people ever said we're with the Love Family cult. It didn't work that way. It's something that in hindsight, I now know to be true because they were in the same place at the same time. And then I started finding names directly connected to the cult as being like my grandfather's old neighbor that I used to play in his house with his two kids. And then I realized what I had basically been born into. I was surrounded by this cult, but this cult has always been a cover for another family's trafficking activities. Again, a lot of the people that join it have no clue that's going on. It's a select number of people that are stealing kids, dealing drugs, and then blending in the weirdness of the hippiness and the religious cult parts of it as cover. It's just cover for those people, but they get a whole bunch of these other people to actually believe it. And it's really effective. And that's using all the MK Ultra audio, sonic, keeping them in light entrainment, audio entrainment, getting them into these events where they don't even know why they feel so amazing. They don't even know their body voltage and electricity is being manipulated by the cult. And so again, there's a lot of things these people know about how to gain people's confidence using technology, electromagnetic fields, entrainment of sonic, ultrasonic waves. They're very adept at it, and they kind of brag about it behind the scenes.
And my grandfather, that was close to one of the guys that's still a historian for the Love family cult, my grandfather had a whole background in radio frequency, and he was a radio communications guy for the Navy in the Korean War, if I remember that correctly. So let's not even start on that one, guys, because again, Pettigrew. My name is Gabe. So that case you just said, dude, I want you to think about this. I've been revealing information. My name is Gabe, and I came from the Pettigrews. And then this girl that allegedly had all this happen, they got everybody's attention, is named Gabby Petito, Petty, because I told people a long time ago that Petty, Mary and David Petty of the Finders cult, that's what this is. This is the Finders cult, okay? It's just one variation on it. The Finders would splinter off into different cults. So you got Love Family Cult, Source Family. Well, Source Family kind of pre-existed it, but it was the way they did it before this. It was like another method. And then you've got the Children of God, which is all known. And that's all the things you see on the surface from people like Rose McGowan and Joaquin and River Phoenix were in that group. Yeah. And so it seems like a little bit more than a coincidence that you would have these people that are major Hollywood players that grow up making many, many films, that they would have their origins back to the Children of God. And then once you realize that Children of God basically is linked to both the Love family cult as well as the Source family, then none of these things really feel like a coincidence if you trace it back the way that I did to that same place where the Nazis came in Merrill, Oregon, because that's where it goes back to, guys. You can track the bloodline from there up to where the cult started. They get everybody into it. They elect their church leader. That guy just controls all of them, has them all like marionettes. And then generation, you only have to have this work for like about a decade or so, or a few years even. And all the kids that are birthed into the cult have these belief systems normalized. So the things you're seeing right now where they're just trying to warm everybody up to all this bizarre, just over the top acceptance of things that we shouldn't be accepting. It really originates in the understanding, loving acceptance of these people, which isn't that. It's destabilization. They want them to be confused about their identity. They want these kids to not know what they are, and they want to pass that along to the next generations because these people only want them around. They want you in a messed up relationship. They want you destabilized, but I promise you, they're setting things up brilliantly for themselves. See, that's the whole game, to get you all to dance along to their drummer that they know is leading you down into a dark alley where you're just going to be whatever, okay? Forgotten, irrelevant, or just confused. I thought I was on a path. Now I got stuck in some alley. That's Nazism for you.
Okay, welcome back. Before I get into talking about the structure of these religious movements and cults, whatever your preferred nomenclature, I need to kind of explain why I'm going to start talking about the Oddfellows and Rebekahs again, and I guess the genesis of how I came across this information. I've been kind of tracking the origins of some of these groups back to what appears to be a common group of language and coding and ciphers that are used within the Rebekah and Oddfellow order. And because I knew people that had been Rebekahs and Oddfellows and had them close to my family, I had a little bit of personal experience through which to draw from and to actually go out and research these issues on my own. And so in kind of in the process of researching genealogy and these secret societies like the Rebekah Order and, the Rebekah Assembly and the Independent Order of Oddfellows, I started to discover that there seemed to be sometime in the early 20s and 30s, 40s, around that time frame, a movement within the Nazi Party, the SS, to sort of take control of some of these groups, potentially within the United States, and that carried over into the broadcast industry, dating back to early radio programming and into the film industry, and how it seems like there's an influence of that continues on to today, and that that the methodology was using this eugenics and breeding methodology that was really a throwback to Nazi era politics and methodologies that were started over there. And again, it's really not a stretch to talk about these things in terms of secret societies, because Hitler was known to have loathed the Freemasons. I mentioned this in another article, and that it was part of his strategy and the Nazi Party strategy to take over Freemasonic lodges in different European countries that they invaded. So this is a known part of their history, and we know this from historical documents. And so when I was looking into that, it took me out to the Tule Lake area, which, once I started understanding the relationship between German, Italian POWs that had been brought from, those countries who had Nazi ideology and may have been brought over to the United States, specifically to Northern California and Southern Oregon, perhaps not so much as POWs, but it could have potentially been part of a quiet coup to just import them quietly. So what I'm really offering here is a possible alternative history to what you typically see on Wikipedia. I'm not suggesting that this is fact, but I have done some research that could potentially corroborate that, the influence of Operation Paperclip in the importation of Nazis extends far beyond that specific project. So again, I'm not telling you this is 100%. It's just some things that we need to start discussing regarding these groups and the common code that they used, the naming conventions, and how that has parallels to some of these eugenics and breeding programs. So before I talk about that part, I'm really studying this more sociologically. I do have personal connections, and so I'm not going to tell you that this doesn't hit me a little bit personal, because once I started to understand how far back this goes and who was behind it, I just started to really see a lot of the people that have been involved with these programs with a great deal of empathy and compassion, even amongst the ones that I think have treated me with aggression. Once I started to understand this program more intrinsically and how far back it goes, I found a lot of forgiveness in my heart.
Just taking a quick pause there. Steve Allen connected to the cult that's close to Rose McGowan through his son. His wife was Jane Meadows. That's her right there. Now, riddle me this, Riddler. Why do these two people look so much alike? Is it just genes, or is there something else going on? And I'm going to leave you with that thought. And if you've seen my slides on people like Liev Schreiber versus Walter Schreiber, or William H. Macy versus Dan Daria, this is just another in the same set. Why are their teeth the same, their lips the same, their eyebrows, their eyes, their mannerisms, their voice intonations so similar?
To surround them on all the different sides if you seek to influence their behavior. It's really not that complicated, And part of that is called love bombing, which I covered in my last article. And I would classify love bombing the way that these groups tend to practice it, that seem to have connections to these Nazi breeding programs. This is a near militant form of aggressive surrounding these people using these concepts of spheres of influence, surrounding them and convincing them that, this is the way to go, and then having each layer beyond that covered. So if the person ever decides that, maybe they don't really like what, these ones in the blue are saying, then they need to have these ones covered down here. See? And it's just a method of psychological warfare. And really, if you want to look at it less cynically, it's just a way to control the behaviors of others that might be different than you. So, blood groups tend to communicate, like it's probably the reason why the Nazis studied twins so much, was because there's a sort of a psychic, I guess you could call, connection at a DNA, RNA level where they seem to be vibrating at the same frequency and they can kind of communicate at that telepathic level. And they know that about blood groups, that even if it's not what you would normally call telepathy, there is a degree of influence between blood groups, meaning that you have influence leaders within blood groups depending on their characteristics. And I think that they have been using in more recent times the Human Genome Project data to discover like who has these characteristics. But going back, it usually just happened by, I think, infiltrating secret societies in smaller towns when populations were smaller, because that was just your way into understanding, who was related to who, how far did those records go back. A lot of those people were the ones that were practicing genealogy, were part of those groups. So again, this is really just trying to study this at a more I don't know, scientific, sociological level to see how the Nazis gained influence just using structural psychology as their quiet coup, as opposed to, going with full-on weaponry. And part of that quiet coup was, broadcast radio initially, which transitioned into television and other things that we see today, film. So, all right, getting back to how that's going to connect to these groups. So there seemed to be a common structure that all had throwbacks to Rebecca and Oddfellow type symbolism and naming conventions. And that's relevant because if the Nazis were infiltrating those groups and that's how they got their initial genealogy research and that's how they knew, which groups to target, then if you think about it, before we had the internet, before there was large databases of testing, then this was their method of just gaining influence over the ones that they knew were the influence leaders. So part of that would be love bombing. It's the notion of just surrounding them with quote unquote love, but obviously trying to steer them towards breeding that was of their selection. And whatever it took, these people they saw themselves as breeders. Humanity didn't really have much to do with it. I think some of these people were all well and good if everybody liked one another, but that wasn't necessarily something that they cared about.
Yeah. So to those who make the argument, didn't your mom raise you really well? It's like, well, sure, of course. The same way you raise a purebred dog, the same way you make sure that the cow is as beefy and big as it needs to be before the slaughter. The same way that you want the pig to have a big round girth so you can get lots of bacon from it. That's why. That's their mentality. They'll give you a great upbringing, but there's a reason.
Influence in DNA, RNA characteristics to where if somebody isn't one of them, that they're at least controlling them. And if they can't control them, then they have a map of their entire, bloodline to know who to go after, to influence or to eradicate. It's really just the essence of the quiet coup, using these Human Genome Project databases, things involving genetics, as their core database weapon. And part of that, I think, going back to the 60s, was getting people into these cults. So again, I'm not going to tell you that their belief systems are wrong. I don't think that there's anything wrong with being a Christian. I don't think there's anything wrong with being Jewish or having New Age mysticism as your belief systems or being part of the Golden Dawn. That's not the issue. The issue is that what we have is that these are the doorways into, based on this high-level group that appear to have Nazi values. This has been typically their doorway as planners into our subconscious as a society. They find these ways, and cults are just really one form that are the most obvious that we can point to. But really, it's been done in very subtle ways using other structures like corporations and things like that, or churches, or whatever the social group is. Always having a hierarchical structure, somebody who's dominant, that is from the group, that they want to be the influence leader and to selectively breed with whoever is down that chain. You see where I'm going with this? They want to be at the top of the chain and they want everyone else to be under them. And if they can't do that, then the method would be to eradicate. So it's really that not so much that you have to be white, it's that you have to accept the hierarchical structure that they're seeking, and then you can become a part of it. And that seems to be what they've done in the United States in a very quiet way. And part, if my research proves out that of the way they did it, was to use these groups. So what you'll notice is that, like the Source family, for example, doesn't really have a lot of negative reports. The documentary that's available on Amazon Prime, most people seem to have had a pretty good time. You don't hear people really reporting too many negative things. There was some people reporting things like they were being told who to breed with, they were being told who to live with, that type of thing. So on that point, again, assuming we were dealing with free-willed people here who weren't having their opinions steered artificially, what can you say about that? People made the choice to do those things. But then you start finding, as you go into some of these other groups, that they had a very similar methodology where that was the doorway, but it was using a different type of figurehead or a different type of belief system. So like with the Source family, they had integrated everything into that, right? I mean, it was paganism, you had Golden Dawn, sex magic, there was parts of, they all called themselves Aquarians. They would, very similar to some of these other groups, they would abandon their former name, take on a new name that had Aquarian in it. Similarly, one of these other groups, Love Family, does the same thing. You give up all your property, you abandon your former name, you take on a new name with the last name Israel. So you go from John Doe to being Virtuous Israel. If you're an Aquarian, you would go from being John Doe to Virtuous Aquarian, for example. That would be, two examples of that within two different groups that, as far as I know, have no connection. But when you look into their structure, there's a lot in common that goes back to Nazi eugenics and breeding at a high level. Now, again, I don't think that that's necessarily the intention of the people within the group. And I think maybe even at the highest level of these groups, a lot of these people do have a belief system that's pretty rigid and that's at their core values, meaning it's legitimate. They actually believe it in a lot of cases. But I also think that it's used by certain groups as a cover to explain away anomalous behavior to where people on the outside won't look in, because they'll say, well, that's just that weird cult doing their weird things. So you can see how you have to be careful that you're not too dismissive of the legitimate issues of abuse that can occur within some of these groups, while also not unfairly attacking the other groups that really are just sort of, people just experiencing, new age mysticism and exploring some of these occult concepts. There's a big difference between the way these things manifest in private. So again, don't be overly dismissive, but I don't think you should be quick to judge these things either, or to lump all these things together. So I apologize that I'm discussing about all three of these in tandem, but it's merely because that there's a structure that's similar that connects back to the breeding programs and the eugenics programs. So I wanted to talk more about this concept of love bombing, because that seems to be something that they're really aggressive about doing with the children of God. And in the documentary that I watched, the lady talked about how when she moved to Costa Rica with the group, that they were very aggressive towards her. And it seemed like, all that Christ love and the way that everybody was very accepting turned into something that was more demanding, commanding, militant. They were being told who to live with, who they should breed with, and being told that they had to do it, and believing that they had to do it. And that's troubling, because that particular group used a very similar naming convention to something that's common within the International Order of Oddfellows and the Rebecca's Assembly. So the reason why I'm coming around full circle here to this is because as I'm studying these groups and how they trace back, it seems like some of the ones that had more troubling histories tends to have this exploit that was through the International Order, or excuse me, the Independent Order of Oddfellows, the IOOF, and RA, the International the International Association of Rebecca's Assemblies, otherwise known as the IARA, sometimes shortened to RA. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with these groups in and of themselves, but it's pretty clear to me that when you start tracing back their history, that they have a connection to some of the early Nazi parties' exploits into our infrastructure at both broadcasting industry, telecommunications, and most forms of media. But it started with radio, and that's why I wanted to come back to this slide, is that in the the Children of God group, they talked about, they were called the chain. And so you can kind of see how they integrate some of the aspects of some of the underlying mechanisms into the coded language that they place into their group. And that's kind of an occult practice, part of what they're doing there, as far as what they're not the Nazi form of occult practice. And as we get to talking about the connection between that code involving the chain and the Children of God, then I have to get back to the Love family, because these aren't the same groups on the surface, and I'm not even going to suggest to you that they have the same underlying structure behind. But the Love family, otherwise known as the Love Israel family, otherwise known as the Church of Jesus Christ at Armageddon, does have some roots that trace back to Seattle, Washington. That's relevant to me because that's where I'm from. That's where I was raised. And this group of people, as I started to look deeper into their history, I started noticing that they were pretty much near me almost everywhere I went. And in many cases, there were times where I would have like a neighbor who told me that their parents were going to one of these festivals that were run by the Love family. And so I can remember just from recall being around people that had connections to this group, but not knowing it until just recently. So that's why I'm having kind of this huge, oh, wow, moment right now as I'm researching all this. And so while I'm talking about that, I just want you to know, I don't know exactly what's going on with this group in particular, but there does appear to be some connections to what's called there was the International Order of Odd Fellows group in Seattle area. So that ran a lodge in Seattle that was connected to a lot of the counterculture in Seattle music. So they hosted a lot of bands in the 90s when, alt rock was becoming a thing, before we were even calling alt rock that. We didn't even have a genre called alternative, and a lot of those bands that became alternative were playing in an Odd Fellows lodge out in Seattle. So there's an article in The Stranger that discusses this called the He-Man Jew Haters Club. It was in the August 15th, 1995 issue, and it kind of gives you, a history into that group, that they had a guy named Keith Anderson that ran a group called the Ark, and how it was Odd Fellows that were sponsoring it. They had a lot of this, movement to become a sovereign citizen and abandon your credentials. And, we see kind of some remnants of that methodology today. Mm-hmm. And so the reason why I wanted to start this discussion a little bit is I don't have a problem with this group in particular necessarily. It's just that as I started.
Guys, January 6th, I'm not saying them. What I'm telling you is look at their whole getup, the beards, the hair, the look. Who's running Antifa? Who's pulling the strings behind their partners out there on the riots? It's those cults. I've been saying it for a long time. But if you tell people it's a Nazi cult, they're going to look at you like, oh, so patriots are Nazis. Like, no. These Nazis pretend to be patriotic when they wear the costume of a patriot. Then they go do something that, well, Andrew Breitbart calls it Dadaism. I've always called it Discordianism. But that's what it is. Ridiculous. But when the press gets all the footage, it's just an assembly of people acting ridiculous and looking ridiculous, but they're actors that pretend to be patriots, that pretend to be good Americans, and they're just not. They're just actors. But then they have partnerships with the DOJ, and then it's like, hey guys, we'll set you up and we'll knock you down. And they're all like, great, we're not using our real names anyways. And then they just can shave their head or get their beard done for a while, or just repurpose the whole beard and long hair thing and go into a more hippie group or a more conservative Southern group or whatever accepts that look. But these people a lot of times have 10 different names and just travel the country being different people. Sometimes for a long stretch as one person. Sometimes they're playing like characters on YouTube, giving you your conservative news. I cannot tell you how many of you people that are conservatives are just listening to these people, and it just boggles my mind. It boggles my mind that you can't see it. And everybody, but especially you guys, should be more adept. Like, you really, if you're conservative, like by now you should know the game. The liberal parts of these people, they've been so indoctrinated into this nonsense that it's a lot harder for them to see it. But when you guys see the first level of deception, you need to get better about seeing deception 2.0, 3.0, and 4.0, because they're all lined up and they're in your alt media. They're your favorite conservative troll. Like, I love it when they send zingers at those libs. I love it when they call that person a libtard. Those people that are really promoting that anger cycle, almost all the time, they're not authentically conservative. And you're giving your attention, you're giving your time, you're giving your resources to people that don't give two shits about you and are actually trying to make your life harder and make your position more abrasive to other people to where they won't listen to you. And they're experts at it. And I promise you, I would bet my limbs of mine that at the January 6th Capitol riot, some of these people were there, okay? Or their offspring. That's their MO. But they are not Nazis like patriots. They're Nazis in the sense that they wear the mask of good Americans, do ridiculous Dadaism activities, looking like you or trying to create an illusion of what you look like because they don't really look like you. But then everybody believes it. The media repeats it. And we know the media is in on this now because the reporters are from these cults. They're protecting their friends and family. And then the DOJ buys into the narrative, the FBI, because again, populated with the same people. You don't want to hear it a lot of, well, you do. But yes, they're there. They'll prosecute the cases at the highest level, but they're prosecuting an actor and a made-up narrative. Rinse, repeat. Trafficking keeps going on. No matter how much AI we have that can track anything, anywhere, anytime, can't find those kids, can you? By design.
To read about them and how they had connections to Queen Anne Hill in Seattle. They were all over Washington State, Alaska, Hawaii, Bothell, Washington in particular. See, these are places where I, in particular, have also been close to. Not Hawaii or Alaska, but Washington State, Bothell, in particular, Bothell. See, and so when I was kind of going over the official history and articles that were written for Seattle Times, it didn't really jive or match, rather, my memory of some of the experiences that I had with people that I now know to be, former members of the group. And the timelines that I have these memories from do correlate to when that group was active in Seattle. So I wanted to just tell people that, openly, because I don't know how to get into this larger discussion of the influence of Nazism on breeding programs and how that connects to the Oddfellows and Rebecca orders while still being respectful to everybody. So just understand that I understand how these groups trace back, if my research is correct, going all the way back to the 20s. And I know their methodology of surrounding a person from birth. Okay? Anybody who's had this happen or has become part of these groups, you have more than likely been probably either followed from birth or pretty close to it. Somebody's known about your existence since childhood or has been trying to learn of it, because they don't surround you for no reason. They're looking for you to become a part of their group, or they seek to change your behavior. And this is really the method that was employed by secret societies dating as far back as whenever, the beehive symbolism. And specifically within Oddfellows and Rebecca's, the chain is mentioned. So you have the chain as the 3 rings here. You have it on their Oddfellow buildings here. Typically, you have the FLT in the chain. Also, the Rebecca's assembly is known as RA. So the reason why I wanted to show you the Radio Orphan Annie thing is because if you think about how this traces back to the early days, and getting back into some of the rural parts of like California, Oregon, and parts of Texas, Fort Bliss area too, assuming that the Operation Paperclip narrative is true, then you have to know just how integrated into the subconscious that these programs have become. The very earliest people who were controlling broadcast radio, they were, sending all the little girls and boys, the Ovaltine rings and everything like that, the RA, the Secret Society, the Radio Orphan Annie. It's in Christmas Story. You see the boy looking for his Ovaltine Orphan Annie decoder ring. All this methodology of secret societies has been sort of ingrained into our the adults and our grandparents, but it's been more concealed to us and these newer generations. We didn't really get it as the straightforward way of doing this. Back then, they practiced numerology, and that's what the Radio Orphan Annie secret decoder ring is. It's just a match of a letter to a number. And so they would spin it around, and whatever the number matched to that letter, that's what you had. So that's numerology. And what I'm telling you is as I'm starting to research these groups and learn more about how they function, they are using this basic secret decoder ring methodology. And it does have roots basically in eugenics, Nazi breeding programs, influencing the behaviors of populations, or what they called mass resonance manipulation. And yeah, it included radio, television, all forms of broadcasting, going back to the earliest, whenever they began. These have been the groups. This has been their value system. So it is worth discussing, and I'm going to get more into the Love family and the Church of Jesus Christ at Armageddon specifically. But before I do, I just want everybody to understand that I'm really not an adversary in presenting this information. I understand intrinsically how far back this goes, and I want you to know I'm really trying to approach this with a lot of respect, even towards people who may have been treated me with aggression historically, because I really do understand what's happened. And I hope that you know that I really just want people to understand at a more deeper sociological level what's happening here. And it does have to involve talking about some of these esoteric concepts, because they have been integrated. And if I don't do it in a way that kind of pieces it together like this, where we can have an intelligent discussion, it's just going to come across as the way it's typically been done. So I know this one kind of went all over the place, and I'm going to kind of bring it back into more of a structure here to where we get into specific topics. But I had to bring this all into sort of a big circular discussion so that we kind of see how the coded language, the numerology, the methods of eugenics, the connections to Nazi SS, how there is sort of a genesis into how all these things tie together. And if you look at my previous articles on, Tule Lake, the cemetery out in Merrill, Oregon, you'll see all of these codes and ciphers will go back to specific geographic locations and specific groups, families that have controlled broadcast, radio, television, and film for many decades. And they do seem to have Oddfellow and Rebecca connections. And those groups do seem to have heavily integrated into them Nazi SS connections. And that's why we have to have this discussion involving cults. We have to have the discussion involving religious movements, the connections to the way these things are exploited or infiltrated by the Order of Oddfellows potentially, but not necessarily as the Oddfellows, but more as Nazi SS wearing the mask of the Oddfellows and the Rebeccas to do their work, as they've done with the Freemasons, as they've done with religions. They merely place the mask of these groups on to do work using their name. So please understand, people, this isn't me pointing the finger at any groups. This is just me trying to have an intelligent discussion about how do we fix what's happened, how do we restore the reputations of groups that have been maligned historically, and just inject some a little bit of sanity into the discussion, instead of it always being the typical conspiracy discussions involving these topics. And what I would like to do also is just to people to understand that we really have to start addressing behavioral issues involving these people with a great deal of respect, even when these people are being aggressive or acting erratic in our society. Because once you understand how sophisticated the means are when people are brought into these groups, it's not just behavioral. A lot of these people are treated to electromagnetics, light flicker, rhythms that are tuned into them to always respond to from a very early age. And if you study these groups, you'll find all the tracers of MK Ultra methodologies. And you can look that up, you and Cameron. Again, there's a lot of things on Wikipedia that I'm not going to tell you that they're true, straightforward, but elements of them and how they were integrated into some of these other programs are true. So just use it as a template to know that, yes, they did things like light flicker, strobes, rhythms, vibration, electromagnetics. And the people that knew that and had that esoteric wisdom were people like the Oddfellows, the Rebeccas, the Freemasons. And so, yes, the Nazis, they wanted to be in those groups or to control them completely the same way they tried to do with religion, the same way they tried to do with broadcast, radio, television, everything else. It's a quiet coup methodology, and it's done by spheres of influence, quietly controlling populations through breeding. So I'm not sure where the next piece is going to go. I think we're going to probably talk a little bit more about the family, but thank you for your time. Okay, so I just wanted to find a quick and easy way to explain Nazi occultism in a way that adds a little humor, but without taking away from the seriousness of it. But at the same time, this is a really good example, right? So in the movie Animal House, there's a scene at the end of the movie where they decide they're going to sabotage the parade, right? And so they all wait at the end of the parade for the band to come down, right? And so these two guys are kind of waiting there for their moment. And as the band leader and the band approaches, one of the guys goes and starts marching, along with them, and then he starts catching up with the conductor, and he just kind of marches it right at the same pace, kind of follows them along one after the other, just mirrors them precisely, right? He's different, but he's mirroring him very precisely. And you notice he shoves him over, and then just at the right opportunity, he waits for the baton to land into his own hands, and now he has replaced the organic leader of their movement, and the Nazi has taken over. Once he takes over, he subverts the parade. They should be going down the street, but no, he says, let's go down this alleyway instead. Now, I wanted to show you this as a quick example because I've been having a hard time explaining, I don't really find the term Nazi occult mirroring and things like that online, so I'm trying to find a way to explain it. What's the best way to describe this concept? And this is it. They follow along side by side, match exactly what they're doing, behave like they do, and then just at that right moment, steal the baton away, shove them down, and that is Nazi occult mirroring. Hey everybody. Okay, I'm going to try to handle this as delicately as I can, but basically I was looking into the Love family a little bit more, and I keep...
Okay, this is a core to understanding modern events relative to the cults. So what I just told you earlier about when you see these LARPs, these LARPs, these false flags, there's a whole ecosystem of actors that have support at a very high level. And Love family, Children of God, and Source family members, offspring of them oftentimes, are a big part of what makes that a reality. And they love to make conservatives look like fools. They love to make people who love America, who are looking for something a little bit better for our country and a greater partnership with the rest of the world in a way that's, we maintain our sovereignty, but we're not like these poking aggressors everywhere. These people always hijack narratives and make us all look bad. And there's such a small number of people, but they have a huge control over the media. I mean, that's really what you're boiling down here, guys. You have this less than 1% of the population group that can really steer the entire belief systems of everybody. And if you really know what they believe in, it would wow. So this isn't a very long article, but this tells you exactly what I was around growing up. The next couple articles, that's what it is. The theme is basically, here's the origins of it. Then I'm going to show you in the next article how they use computer generated imagery to further their effery. So now it's it's beyond just like what they used to do with playing with the cults and everything like that. Now the new cult is getting you all to follow them on YouTube. It's getting you all to watch their channels and then getting you to show up to protests. And then they start to do things to steal your information, malign your narratives, make you look bad, all that. And that's a big part of these people's methodology.
Finding more material involving their connections, involving real estate, wineries, vineyards, access to cave systems, their proximity to Nike missile silos. And in particular, out in Arlington, Washington, there's an article that I think it was in Seattle Times, but I have a clipping from it. But basically talks about how this family's been broke for a long time and that, they lost all their fortune. They had to split up everything and move to all these different parts. But I don't know how true that is. Just that as I'm kind of looking into things and where some of my research involving some of these families are, and realizing that I had some people from Love family that lived near me or were in the neighborhood where my grandfather lived, or lived next to us on the farm that I lived. I mean, really, there was a lot of them. And they never told me that they were part of this group, and I wasn't ever part of that group. So since I can kind of identify the people a little bit from personal experience, I have to start asking questions. And I'm asking this honestly, and I'm trying to be respectful here because, in my history, I studied World War II and the effect that the Germans had on the Jewish community. And that part of our history really affected me. And I studied it for a long time when I was younger. So when I find evidence potentially, well, let me put it this way: when I find this kind of the markers of things that might involve the mockery of Judaism and things like that, I have to ask a question: is that happening, or is it just that somebody doesn't understand that maybe perhaps what they're doing might be considered disrespectful to Jewish people, or is me even asking this question disrespectful to Jewish people? I don't know. So I'm asking. But basically, as I was kind of looking into their properties and things like that, it was purely because of the proximity to cave systems and tunnels and telecommunication things is why that I found them connected to this organization called the Union for Reform Judaism. And so I kind of looked into that, and it had some interesting markers on it. It's said it was founded by Isaac Mayer Weiss. But when I looked at the photo of Isaac Mayer Weiss, I kind of noticed that he looks like other characters that I find in other lore that doesn't seem entirely true, connected to other articles. And I'll get into that soon, because there's some companies out there and some organizations where I'm finding a commonality into the lore, which makes me think that there might be some people making up history and adding some things to Wikipedia that aren't true, which is something that I think most people kind of know and suspect already. And so I guess I'm just asking respectfully, I mean, is what going on here, is this something that's kind of like, did you actually, because the Love family, they actually would take on the last name Israel. And they said the reason why they did that wasn't because of the country or the religion. They said they were doing it because love is real. They were making a pun. It was like they were expressing that. So that's my understanding of it. And so if that's what they were doing, then it seems to me like they weren't becoming Jewish. They were actually just using it as a play on words, but I might be misunderstanding that. So when I find that at the Love family compound in Arlington, there's an address connected to the Union for Reform Judaism connected to them, I have to ask myself, if they're not like Jewish, then why would they be running a Jewish organization? Or even if they're people that converted to Judaism, I'm asking the Jewish community or people who might be like, part of those churches and deeper philosophical leaders, would it be appropriate for them to be running an organization to reform it? And I guess that people, whether they join a religion or they're part of it when they're born, they're still going to be reformers in all regards. But I'm just asking the question here to see if, is this something that, we should be concerned about? Is it a form of like Discordianism where somebody's just sort of using this as a parable, a drama to play out in front of people to teach them a lesson? Or are we dealing with something where it's more of like the law of reversal? Because if it's something that's more related to these Nazi occult groups, then what they would be seeking to do, this isn't big if, I'm not saying that's what they're doing here, but what a Nazi group would be doing would be to join a religion or to represent themselves as the religion and then subvert it from within using the concept of the law of reversal, where they basically join it, mirror everything, pretend to be it, and then they completely change the meaning of it in a very precise mathematical fashion. I mean, when I'm saying mathematical, I mean that by angles and everything. They take it in a complete opposite direction. And there's a precision to it that involves their form of occultism, which is sort of like a form of witchcraft. So if you've ever seen like pentagrams and triangles thrown together with weird sigils and symbols, that means something to them, and it's sort of a map to their esoteric work when they are occultists. So since the Love family does seem to integrate forms of occultism into what they do, and there has been tracers of OTO and Golden Dawn, I'm just asking the question, I mean, are we dealing with Discordianism? Are we dealing with of a benevolent source? Or are we dealing with mockery of a Nazi occult type? And I'm asking this respectfully on all sides. And if there's a reason why they run this organization, or maybe that it's been mistagged to them or something like that, and I'm not correct, please tell me, and I'll correct this. But I'm just trying to understand what might be going on with this organization when it comes to this specific issue, only because even as a non-Jewish person, I just want to make sure that, we're all being respectful of one another's faith. regardless of somebody's different than us. And since I have had some of these people that have been close to me historically, I just want people to know that, I might even be a good person to have a conversation with both sides, if something disrespectful is happening. I'm not going to tell you that I know these people today. It's just that I do seem to have had a history with them. And actually, I don't necessarily know them today, but I can tell you that there's definitely markers to indicate that I have people from the Love family that stay very close within proximity to me, because they seem to be connected to members of my family. So just by virtue of that, I want to be open with people and tell you that that's a thing. But no, I don't seek out or have personal connections with them as a cult. So just full disclosure there. And so just wanted to ask the question, and hope I'm not being disrespectful to anybody here. And thank you for listening. All right, this one's taken me a while to put together, but I just need to get through it. I've done some previous articles about this.
All right. I would say this one again is pretty vital to understanding my personal connection to it. So if you say, Gabe, why or whatever, I'm still, I have some old material that I pulled offline for a while. I might have made it available again, that was connected to my grandfather, James Pettigrew. So some things I may not say in this presentation that I will just straight up tell you now is, my grandfather was James Pettigrew. He was married to that woman, that Martha C. Pettigrew that you saw on the headstone earlier. This is their neighborhood. And this is like the core of why, like, I know about things. And I've done articles since then. We're already at 2.5 hours, so I'm only going to make this one about 3 hours, in case you're wondering, when is this going to end? In about 30 minutes or so. So, but I need to play this article, another one maybe, and then I'm going to wrap things up. And if there's questions, I'll take them or whatever. But I just have some like commentary at the end of this. But to me, this was some pretty vital material right now as we're ascending, which we are. And it's a call for a greater understanding of what happened up until now, because we're going to be confronted over and over again about, what can I forgive and what's forgivable. And it helps to understand how we got here. Me personally, some of these people have made my lives completely miserable and done me enormous, both psychological and physical harm at times. I bounce back, I heal, right? It doesn't damage me permanently in either sense, but temporarily it kept me stalled, it kept me frozen, it's been ugly. But I understand how we got there. I've looked at some of the soulless people that wind up being spit out of these programs. So that's all this is I'm telling you about. Some of these people are just completely, they got soul jacked. And you can do that with technology. They're playing host to something else.
A Nike missile silo up on 228th. I was raised just a few miles away from this neighborhood. And my grandfather, the guy who was raised as my grandfather, James Pettigrew, was also, he lived in that neighborhood since the mid-70s. My family had a house in that neighborhood for a brief time. But I was really too young to remember most of what happened there during that time, but I do have some very vague memories. Point is, though, I was near that facility. I did live there briefly, and then the rest of the time that I lived by a few miles away, and I would go back to visit frequently on the weekends to see. There's a lot of kids in that neighborhood who I can now identify as probably being part of the Love family. And at the time, I just didn't realize it, because I think that if they were doing the hippie kind of religious movement compound thing, they'd mostly disbanded by the time that I was being integrated into some of the kids potentially that would have been part of that. But I can at least recognize that since a lot of the Love families settled in the same neighborhood as James Pettigrew, that it's reasonable to assume that there is a connection there. And since one of the historians that's connected to the Love family, I've connected to James Pettigrew as well, and I do remember that individual. It's hard for me to ignore the connections to all this. So I just had to put that out there to be forthright with everybody, because I do have some concerns over the narratives that are spun by Seattle Times, not maybe giving all the full details about it, and maybe painting a picture of just a select core group of people that may not entirely be real people. They might be some fictional entities that are hiding some actual personalities. So that's a common thing that I've noticed here. So I hope that doesn't sound a little weird, but I'll be able to demonstrate this a little bit later in another article. But the reason why I wanted to bring this up a little bit is because in some other articles I did, I mentioned that James Pettigrew could potentially have some connections to the Finders cult. And if you're not familiar, they were a group that was had some attention put on them in the 80s because they were connected to this group of guys that were taking some kids in a van. I think they were found with 6 kids in Florida, and then they were connected to a facility up in Washington, D.C., where when they investigated, they found a whole bunch of telex terminals that were trafficking children back and forth. And that's troubling to me, right? Because these were early computer experts. They had access to to technology that most people weren't even using back in the 70s and 80s. And they were already doing things like doing banking transactions back and forth to foreign nations and things like that. And the evidence they found there specifically involved child trafficking and animal mutilation, Satanism, photos that involved some things of that nature. So it was pretty bad. And because they were connected to the CIA, basically the investigation was called off. And since then, there's been a lot of outrage, or rather uproar, and anger, rightfully so. It bothers me, this notion that a couple people can get away with kidnapping 6 kids, basically, and just offer some flimsy excuse for why they were found in the back of this van, and then because the CIA steps in, they were told to go away. So the point is that since I have all these troubling connections and I see so much disinformation being spun, I can kind of recognize the origins of some of that disinformation. I want to talk about the case up there in regards to landmarks, because the thing I've noticed about the people that are doing this, including like areas that James Pettigrew has been attached to historically, and that clan that's from the Tule Lake facility that's connected to some of the Nazi breeding programs, is landmarks are a big part of what they do. So when I'm talking about James, I'm actually kind of drawing that parallel back down to the Tule Lake concentration camps and some of the families that were doing some of the, what do you want to call it? They were connected to the POW camp, where we imported a lot of German, Italian POWs back in the 40s. And since I've traced those groups from there up to Eastern Washington and into Bothell, Washington, I think it's reasonable to say that they have a lot of presence here. And so, since landmarks is a thing they use, I wanted to show you a little bit here that I showed you one before about the lion, the before and after with that. And I also want to show you how if you rotate your maps in Google Earth in different directions, you can sometimes find some different landmarks. So some will be really obvious when you're pointed, north, south, east, west. So I'm just going to show you different perspectives here to see how that works. And so in the process of doing that near the neighborhood where both, I was born into, and I know there was a lot of abuse that occurred in that neighborhood. I found these landmarks with babies, and the first one I found here was the baby with the tube going into its face. It's near this area called off of Carter Road, where 14 turns into Carter, and near this area called Willow. And there's this other one where there's a baby crawling on the ground. It's just, near it. So if I'd only found one of these kind of baby landmarks, I thought that would have been kind of weird. I probably wouldn't have mentioned it. But since I found 2 of them, I thought it's notable and worth mentioning, since this is a group of people that do place landmarks in the roads and things like that. And if you start scanning this neighborhood, I'm not going to go over all of them now because it would take too long, but you're going to start finding more of these. I mean, quite a few, actually. Not babies, but there's going to be like, animals, elephants, faces. Again, these are things that are done with intention. City planners do these things. I know because I've known city planners. I actually have one in my family, probably more than one, actually, if I were to really ask around. But there's one that I definitely know that does planning work, so name streets and things like that. So point is that in the process of looking over all these landmarks and everything, I did locate a cold case murder before, and it took place, according to this cold case card, about 300 to 400 feet off of 228 Southwest. And if you notice here, it places you at the lion's tail of this neighborhood, or what I've identified as the lion's tail, roughly. And so, knowing what I know, about that neighborhood and James Pettigrew and his connection to the Finders, and how they were telecom experts, computer experts, and had all the early access to these systems, I have to ask myself honestly, if I call this tip line, will I actually get, you know, somebody that'll actually process my call, and will it go through correctly? Because if I've been monitored, by James and his group, all this time, and they kind of had free reign over these things, and that was his domain up there, historically, I think I have some legitimate concerns as to whether or not I could actually report something, especially because I'm a telecom expert and I know things about routing of phone numbers. Since I do know those things, I just wanted to put that out there to tell people that it's not just that I'm concerned about this, it's that this particular number is routed to an area that's very relevant numerologically to the group that's doing this. So I don't want to get too much into that yet. But if you are wondering about what the specific dynamics are behind why I'm concerned, I would probably direct you to my articles that I've done in the past, and I'll add some links here to incidental surveillance. What role could SAIC and Ericsson have played? The other article I'd point you to is SAIC, A Brief History of Internet Dominance, and Ericsson, The Wizard of Oz Behind Our Stockholm Syndrome of Surveillance. So here's the thing is that, when I tell you to go look at those articles, I'm not suggesting to you that SAIC and Ericsson are behind the rerouting or anything like that. It's just that basically there a couple companies are in control of an enormous amount of information in our country when it comes to reporting things. So what I mean to say is that if I call that 222 number, because I'm a telecom engineer historically, I know, the basic mechanisms of how numbers are routed and who handles those things. So if I become familiar that there might be some people that are close to me, that had a lot of control over that neighborhood, especially when that murder occurred, is it reasonable to say that I have some legitimate concerns about reporting? And, I think it is. I don't think that's a paranoid thing or anything like that, or conspiratorial. I think that it's very logical, considering that I have 20 years of both telecommunications and radio frequency experience. So, that includes, system performance, routing, cell tower planning, things of that nature. I used to maintain cell towers as a job. So I know a lot about these things, and I do understand how 911 calls are routed, what a PSAP is, things like that. These are all, I used to do a lot of the coordination for those things, and doing the testing for it. So I know things. Okay, so because of the relationships that I've identified as being kind of near me that have connections to all these other things I've mentioned prior to that, would it also be fair for me to say that if I try to get onto a website and file for whistleblower protections, that because of the way that SAIC and Ericsson have managed, not only call routing and number warehousing, but also internet domains in the U.S., that there might be some potential concerns there as well? And all I'm suggesting to you is that because I'm a whistleblower that specifically mentioned SAIC and Ericsson, there may be some incentives, for maybe not them directly, but perhaps people who may be advocating, or perhaps on behalf of, or the other things, to block my ability to report things, or block my ability to file for whistleblower protections. Because I feel like at this point, given all the information that I have and the things that I've been trying to discuss in a way that's respectful and open and honest, and I have a lot more, it's just that I have to be very careful about the way I structure it. So, is it fair to say that I have legitimate concerns? Thank you. All right, so I've been talking.
All right. Rather than do this whole face swap thing, guys, I'm not going to do. Hang on. I'm not going to do the face swap article, but I encourage you to go read it, and I'll put a link in after this is done. Hang on here. Oops. I didn't want to do that. Hang on. No. Okay. Nope. All right. This is the one. Reverse hacking MK beta kitten programming. And I'm going to play this one, and then I'll comment afterwards, and I'm going to wrap this up.
Hey, everybody. So I know that the way I talk about music and musicians and music videos don't always jive with everybody. And I think some people are just going to have to accept that about me because what got me into the mess that I'm in today had a lot to do with some of these programming methods. And I'm not the only person that went through them. There's a lot of others that went through it. And to say that artists are any different and that they don't go through all the same methods of control is not seeing the issue for what it is. The people that do this understand energetics. They understand bioplasma. and they understand how our bloodlines fall into that. So there's a coordinated effort in a lot of ways to harness the energy of these types of people. And that's precisely why you find a lot of this quote unquote, Illuminati and gatekeeper type terminology being used, is specifically just because people are selected. And a lot of it has to do with their bloodlines and their ability to influence others on an energetic level. And so once you understand that aspect and you understand who those people are, you'll see the reason why these people are surrounded by handlers all the time, because that person's entire worldview is going to be a creation, a co-creation of the collective perception of everyone that surrounds them. And that's why you have to have empathy for people that are brought into programs, whether they're rich, poor, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's still a slave system, and it's still there to harness energy for some people and rob a person of their own in the process and their own ability to control it. And Walking in My Shoes by Depeche Mode, it's a band that I like. I've liked them since the 80s. And I used to do this song for karaoke. I can do a pretty good Dave Gahan impression, actually, the lead singer. Anyways, but this song in particular, he did a lot of work, or the band did a lot of work with the music video artist Anton Corbin. He's done some films that are pretty good that you might want to check out if you're looking for like symbolism and things like that. And I even though his work looks really dark and it uses kind of some symbolism that makes people uncomfortable, I ultimately think that he does benevolent things with what his video work. But the reason why I wanted to sort of draw a parallel here is because there's a video called All These Things I've Done by the Killers that I've just been fascinated by, because I think it reveals a lot about MK, mind control programming, monarch mind control, and the whole notion of the beta kitten programming. And I think it demonstrates a lot of empathy for people, and it has a huge heart. And I'll get to that in a second. But starting off here, the song Walking in My Shoes I've always liked, and I'll just read the lyrics really quick here. It says, I would tell you about the things they put me through, the pain I've been subjected to, but the Lord himself would blush. The countless feasts laid at my feet, forbidden fruits for me to eat, but I think your pulse would start to rush. I'm not looking for absolution, forgiveness for the things I do, but before you come to any conclusions, try walking in my shoes. You'll stumble in my footsteps, keep the same appointments I've kept, if you try walking in my shoes. Morality would frown upon, decency look down upon, the scapegoat's fate made of me. But I promise now, my judge and jurors, my intentions couldn't have been pure. My case is easy to see. I'm not looking for a clear conscience, peace of mind after what I've been through. And before we talk of any repentance, try walking in my shoes. You'll stumble in my footsteps, keep the same appointments I kept. If you try walking in my shoes, start walking in my shoes. I'm not looking for absolution. You understand it. It just keeps repeating the chorus. It's a good song. And I relate to that. I do. Definitely relate to that. And I think it says a lot about people that have been through this type of programming, because we can look at these people and say, well, they're rich. What problems could they possibly have? You look at these celebrities and you make them into your entertainment and all their breakdowns, And, I get annoyed at the fascination of people like Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, but I still see them as programmed. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I get frustrated at seeing the behavior of, some of the celebrities, but I don't want to see that as entertainment. I think it's tragic. I think it's tragic that people aren't allowed to own their own energetics and to be real creators of their own reality. Instead, they're surrounded by people that all just use them up and use them as batteries, both energetically and for their finances. And that's what a lot of these people go through. They just get hooked up into these, contracts and it's play ball, or it's just like the rest of us, we're all going through it. And that's what I really liked about his work in this, because, and actually I'm going to switch to another thing here, because this video is really cool if you study it, because it plays out of order. So you're having to sort of assemble the story by a series of title cards that are numbered, and then the scenes don't match up with the title cards. So you basically have to piece the whole story together in order from 0 to 7. And So I've been trying to do it actually. It's kind of like a puzzle. I'm not sure why. This is how my brain works though, right? But it got me thinking about something deeper here about what he's doing. So you should just watch the video, and I'm going to leave a link for it, but I want you to watch it first and then come back to this, okay? So play pause now, go back to the video, and then we'll look. All right, so if you're back now, notice how they did this with the video. She goes 0. And the next title card they show up is the 4. This is critical here. See, these women all come in, and they have, they're all dolled up. I just want to say also, guys, I didn't mean to sound disrespectful when I made the cheerleader comment, my other comment thing, or anything like that. It was, I was actually talking about stereotypes and things like that. I don't think that just because somebody was in one of those things, absolutely not. I didn't mean any disrespect by it, is all I'm trying to say. I don't want to drift too far from this, but I apologize if I sounded disrespectful with that. At any rate, what I'm trying to say here, though, is there's like a degree of programming into the way they try to sexualize us with one another. And that's a part of it, is what I'm trying to say. They try to make men into a false image of masculinity that's more about looking thuggish as opposed to actually protecting one another. And they place us in these false paradigms of sexuality about using one another and manipulating one another with sex, as opposed to it being an expression of caring for one another. And they want to harness that energy. And I think that's a lot of the reason why, this word is used, and they like to program it, and understanding that a lot of times they actually started these women off very early in life before they even had a memory. They were having, they were being molested. And not always, but it happened in a lot of cases and things like that. And some people, that was just a decision they decided to make to go in and do somebody's work. And in either case, it's really irrelevant. I think people that make judgments about, people who do like dancing or sex work or anything like that are really, you're being hypocritical, because a lot of people have their energy harnessed, whether it be inside a cubicle or inside one of the places they work, in a club or whatever. So you notice how they're playing with the numerology, each title card, right? It's out of order. This is the exact order in the video. If you see the timestamps, it's at 2 seconds. She says 0. At the fourth scene starts at this. Scene number 1 goes to scene number 3, scene number 6, scene number 5, scene number 2, scene number 7. It's just interesting, right? Why did they do that? This part I thought was cool, right? Because I actually spent a few years in Vegas. My sister's in Vegas, and so I'm familiar with the culture down there, and there is a lot of effort to sort of steer people into these artificial lifestyles of materialism, and to degrade one another, and to leave us all in a place of shame where we don't value one another's for what we really are. We're just strong people that had to go through a lot of shit to get where we are today. And I guess I'm just saying this because if I've ever used some of these words, you have my commitment to never use them again. And I'm not unlike a lot of these ladies. I like this part. See where I'm going. The reason why that word is used by these people is to harness something that's sacred, that we own, and make it theirs. That's what they've been doing to us. And in order to break this slave system, we have to agree not to call one another these types of words. That's all. Unless, you see where I'm going with this, there has to be respect. And people have different expressions. And they, me, there's some words that you can call me. If you wanted to call me that word, it wouldn't bother.
Sorry.
Seriously.
That part's funny to me because I don't care if somebody calls me that, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not a saint. But one thing I can promise you is that I don't judge. And I have a lot of compassion for people who have been on that path. And Everyone deserves to have a pure expression of love and their sexuality. Everyone deserves that. And these people polluted that with us. They got in very early and they polluted it. That doesn't mean that we can't have our expression in the way that we choose. We don't hurt people, they do. See where I'm going with that? These are people that hurt us. They have no qualms about hurting one another. They have no qualms about hurting children. And they use abusive language like this to us while they're doing things that are just unspeakably awful. And if someone's ever called you this, I won't do that to you. I have a lot of respect, and I need people to understand me similarly. We have to stop this language of violence. It's not political correctness. It's when you make language or violence. Sometimes that can be totally passive sounding. Language can be violence. And I just want to heal us from that. And so if people have told you that the path that you've traveled on makes you irredeemable, or the roads that you've walked down make you something less, here's what I have to say to them. They can go fuck themselves, and the rest of us will find our own business. We'll find our own industry. We'll find a way to make all of our scars into healing mechanisms. We'll harness our collective energy together, and we'll abandon your language, and we'll abandon your judgment, and we'll abandon everything that you've set up for us to go against one another. Because that's what these programs do. When you see these, in the beginning, actually, especially towards the end, this is where you really understand the core point. Sorry, right there. See the symbolism? They have the four lined up, the four lined up. Do you understand what's happening to us? We were set up this way to see one another as enemies so that they could harness this energy and this stagnant, so they could pervert it, harness it, deaden it. So there's something to be learned from the video, because we're going to break through that together. We're going to destroy their system of energetic harnessing and manipulation and shame, because we don't deserve that. Anybody who's on board with me, we're gonna make our own world together. And I don't care where you've been up until now; it doesn't matter to me. You have my respect, and we'll work on fixing what happened to us and healing from it together. In whatever way we see fit, that's up to us, not to them. They have no part of that anymore.
Okay, so as far as my prepared material goes, that's pretty much everything that I was really wanting to play for you tonight. I'm trying to keep this pretty close to a reasonable time frame, and I haven't done a stream this long in a while. Don't ask me why I decided to do it this late, but the all of you who have joined up until now, thank you. But I have more to say here, so I'm going to keep going just for a bit. That's an article I did, I don't know, like 2016, I think, 2017. So that's been 5 years nearly that I did that. And the irony is that I didn't even really know what I knew yet. I hadn't really studied energetics at the level that I have now. I didn't have as clear of understanding of it. But I knew there was this thing going on with language corruption and the dismantling of the male-female dynamic, encouraging us to perceive us in this very negative fashion. The ultimate battle they're going for is just to fold in our entire species and then elevate theirs. And when I say species, I just mean like the game is for them to make their bloodline stronger. And so they want us to do it voluntarily. The trick is to get us to just fold in on each other and on ourselves, so that when we do find somebody that really inspires us and we were attracted to, and they really, get us going that way. They want there to be embedded triggers right there in the background to get us to kind of like where it won't happen. They want us anchored in the trauma. They want us um, always like recalling something horrible that happened before. It's one of the reasons why I've been like so into these like Arcade Fire songs lately. There's these lines in them that are just so brilliant that say so much about what's going on right now. Like yesterday, I quoted that one that says, "We're just a million little gods causing rainstorms, turning every good thing to rust." Well, that's what I'm trying to change. Is this not turning? Well, look, the storms are going to happen. um, that's a necessary part of the ascension. That's the cleansing of all of us, and we're going to go through that together sometimes. Um, I'm just telling you that as a person that knows, like, I've witnessed people that seem to be able to proving whether or not they were the ones that caused the storm would be a very challenging thing. But I did this whole thing on barometric pressure related to LA Story, the movie, because I could tell there was something like that that was going on in my life back then, a couple years ago, that love had inspired me, respect and love and admiration for someone that I used to be with. And it was just a bizarre set of synchronicities that brought me to the place that I was, that was nearly almost cinematic in how like storms occurred. And I got grounded for a while. Like I couldn't go anywhere. Like the universe was keeping me stalled someplace and I just didn't understand why. But it was that the love frequency. And within the event, I just wound up learning all of these new things by having to get stuck someplace. But just something happened through this psychoenergetic link, not just to an individual, but I was processing it on so many levels. Like I suddenly felt so much love. And I realized that I was starting to heal at that moment because like when you see the evidence that choosing to accept somebody and love them and learn to how do I say it? When you really find that deep, deep admiration and respect, and that it's unwavering, that your faith in somebody or something or a feeling is unshakable, it really brings you up. It really uplifts you. And so that in particular was just about like all the ways that a lot of us who, again, when you're surrounded by these programs or you're from a neighborhood like me, like to put it bluntly, you guys, like I was just exposed to ideas and ethos well beyond my years of a sexual nature when I was a little kid. And I, again, it didn't manifest in anything horribly dark at that time or even in the future. It was just simply that I had been taught too early to think about it, you know, didn't give me enough time just to be a kid. It was just too soon to integrate those ideas into my perception or to expose me to certain materials. And that's kind of was something that was normalized where I was from. So as I got to be older and I realized what had kind of happened to everybody, and I saw the evidence of people around me that were broken from these things, it just said, something, I have to just start talking with more a sense of greater not just talking, but feeling the understanding and communicating just as rawly as I can, as purely as I can, how I feel about it at that moment. So that's all that's about. Is I just saw so many different times in my life where I'd been with somebody and I could tell that we had been sort of like paired together and that we both had our triggers and that we both had our, we just had so many things that were set up to make us fail in the most meaningful ways. They'll let us succeed in jobs a lot of times and have great careers and make a lot of money sometimes, but they always want us failing on that human level.
They always want us in a discordant, damaging loop of frustration with somebody that we should be in love with, or just should at least be treating as a good friend, or with compassion and understanding or respect for what they've been through. But they want us to really like get on us and each other, you know? And I don't want that to win. And I've made the decision, especially like I reviewed that again to remind myself of something that a lot of people are hurt from the things that have been said to them. And I don't want to be another person that says something like that to a person that's already been so hurt from words. And if I ever fail in that regard, I'm deeply sorry. And I don't want to do it ever again. And so I'm going to reiterate it. So I'm going to end this one tonight here in a minute or two. But yeah, it's just something to think about, folks. A lot of people have been to a lot of places and have been experienced a lot of horrible things. And so it's going to be, as we ascend, there's going to be a call for us to internalize a greater sense of understanding for others, and just to help them get to the place where they need to be so that they can, be redeemed and be saved, and actually allow the love to flow in, because part of the whole system is to block those gateways to where they can't even get the signal. I mean, it's like radio jamming. Trauma is the same thing as like jamming somebody's radio or creating an interception signal or blocking a brainwave or whatever. It's a psychoenergetic event that just prevents a person from ascension. I call the people that do this, and it's less the people and individuals, it's the system that does this, the Ascension Prevention Squad. And so I'm going to remind you all that, don't let the Ascension Prevention Squad get you. The Public Enemy song says it best, watch out for the spirit snipers trying to steal your light. That's Flavor Flav said that inside He Got Game. It's true. Don't let the spirit snipers steal your light, and don't steal each other's light. And when you have somebody in front of you, especially that has had challenges and has been through a lot, I'm reminding myself of this, that we have to just show a little bit more compassion and not get into the negativity loop. It's our role, once we figure this out, to help one another get on that path, to just, because the people they do this to, they have so much ability, they have so much beauty, they radiate. And if you knew what they could do with what they've been weaponized against doing, like they turn these people on society. And so if you can learn to touch their heart in that perfect way, instead of always say like, you're this and you're this, and I know you're part of that, and you must be connected to that, and why was that person around you? Guys, they're going to play that game for everybody. And so don't let that win. Just show some love, show some compassion, show some understanding. Be what you would want to have for you if you had been through something similar and you had made mistakes along the way, or you had been steered the wrong way along the way. Keep your heart open to that. You don't have to take things, though. You see what I'm saying? You don't have to be a victim of it, but you can be a guide, and you can be a path, and you can be a light for them. So that's what I'd like to end this on. I really want to thank you all for staying with me, especially if you started in the beginning on this one and you watched it all the way through, because to me, this is a core of the material that's very important to understand about psychoenergetics and where we need to go to be on the ascension path. So have a good night or a good morning wherever you are. God bless.